Good morning, everyone. I'm going to call this joint meeting to order. I am joined by my colleagues on the Select Board, Rich Wallner and Leanne Gonzalez. I am also joined by my colleagues on the Finance Committee, Don Kelleher, Tim Sutherland, Dan Mills, Abigail Herbert, and Matt Davis. And we are calling this budget hearing to order, and we'll turn it over to you, Mr. Gilberto, to just give some introductory remarks.
Madam Chair, did you want to lead the Pledge of Allegiance for the beginning? Or you?
Sure, of course. If you could all please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
Just very briefly, we're joined here this morning by representatives of the police department, namely Chief Michael Murphy, Chief Michael Murphy, who will introduce his staff momentarily. I will note that, as has been the case over the past few fiscal years, I have asked the department heads to focus their presentations on anything that might be changing in their budget requests this year compared to last year, and where there might be significant differences in budgets. So I've done so, to really focus our discussion, and I feel like it has worked pretty well, and the feedback I've gotten has been pretty good over the past few years. We certainly will welcome any questions should there be any. I do think it's important to highlight that that, as some of you know, Chief Murphy has notified me of his intention to retire later this year, and this will be his final budget presentation in this forum, where a lot of you get to interact, directly with him most regularly. So I do want to acknowledge that and thank the chief for his service. There'll be plenty of other opportunities for me to do so, for all of us to do so down the road. But this is one that's really significant, because when we have had to balance the budget each year in and year out, he has been a significant part of that discussion. And I just want to recognize and say thank you.
Thank you. Am I okay to proceed?
I will unlock the sharing function.
Great, thank you very much. As the town administrator said, I do have 3 of my staff members here today. They had to observe, but certainly if anybody has any questions, I may refer to them as well, because they played a big part of preparing our budget, as they do every year. As the town administrator said, we have, we did put a lot of work. We always put a lot of work into our budget. And, going back when I first prepared my budget, probably a little bit too long, but our presentation was about 3 hours. So we don't take our role as in this budget process. We don't minimize it. This is a very important part of what we do every day. It sets a foundation for our goals and objectives, but also lets the community know how their taxpayer money is being spent. So again, just as part of this is certainly a shorter version of what I submitted. We submitted a 116-page written document. I'm hoping that if you have had a chance to review it, or if you do in the future, that it answers a lot of the questions that you may have. A lot of it is data, so it can be a little bit over, I guess, cumbersome if you really don't know what it actually says. So we're here if there's any follow-up questions. But I will get into the PowerPoint. But this is one of the most important statements I can make as the police chief, because this budget does provide us the foundation and focus for our department to effectively police the community. There was a lot of work, again, that went into this, but my administrative assistant, Kayla Gardner, has worked with finance, since, probably, July 1, we started working on our next year's budget. So I do want to acknowledge her role in this as well. So I will share my PowerPoint at this point. It is disabled at this point, Mike.
I re-disabled it after you for a couple of moments. I should be open now.
Okay. So This is just an overview of what we're going to present today. I'll speak about the grant funding sources that the department does receive on an annual basis. A lot of it is we base it on our calendar year because of the federal and state grants are they run on different schedules. Federal being October through September, and then ours in the state as well, July 1 through June 30th. We'll talk about our budget statement and then a small capital request, which essentially is our fleet report, as well as our goals and objectives for FY24. The slide before you shows a summary of our grant funding. As most of you are aware, the police department does operate our town's primary 911 answering center. All police-related matters are dispatched by our own offices at this point, and all medical and fire-related calls are transferred to the fire department, who operates our 911 secondary point. The 911 grant covers the cost to train both police and fire. As you can imagine, over the course of the last 10 to 15 years, technology has come a long way, going from when we were only able to get a 911 call and it would only display the home phone number. Now there's mapping capabilities, cell phone texting, video. So it has come a long way. In state 911 provides us with not only the training, but the equipment to make sure that all of that we're able to do that without any interruptions. Just talking about the 911 grants and whatnot, we've been working on is probably, at least the select board does know, a civilian dispatch model. And I believe on April 3rd, myself and the fire chief and our support staff will be presenting a civilian dispatch option for that we believe will be the best option for the town. But that wouldn't take effect until FY25. So our 911 grant funding will continue at that point. But you'll hear more about that probably through the fire chief's presentation, as well as he discusses his staffing proposal. Of note, in FY23, we did receive a body camera grant from the Massachusetts Executive Office of Public Safety to cover the initial purchase of body cameras for our 35 officers. One of the requirements for the grants is that we have to have an agreement with the union, and we have not reached an agreement with the patrol and sergeants union at this point. However, myself and our lieutenants who have a separate union have agreed. We have put a requisition in for the body cameras. So call it a pilot program, if you will, but we will have body cameras, at least in a portion of the department, coming up in FY. Well, it should be here very shortly, but going forward, that program should be off the ground. Just a note on body cameras, it's not the end all be all for everything, but I think, it does provide us an opportunity to provide a clear and accurate account of what actually happens. They're not like I said, not the end all be all, but they do offer extreme value. And I think better transparency and accountability, which improves law enforcement legitimacy. And I also think there's a training component too, as well, to it, as we do watch a lot of the videos of incidents that occur across our nation that we can certainly learn from. So there is that value there as well. In our bulletproof vest partnership, that's been in place since the early 90s. Essentially, the town purchases the body worn vests for our officers, the ballistic vests, and then it gets reimbursed by the state and federal government as well. So there's no cost out of town in North Reading, and it has been like that for quite a long time. Our drug-free communities grant, as most of you know, that's Amy Luckowitz's position, and that we've received our second round of 5 years, and this covers 100% of her salary and benefits. And she works on strategies to track use and also prevent the use of alcohol, tobacco, vape products, marijuana, and other prescription drugs. She does do a lot of community presentations. works with the schools a lot, works with our police department and also with our mental health clinician. I'll talk a little bit about her goals as I proceed through this presentation. Our FY23 budget reflects an increase of $121,000 or 2.9% from the appropriated FY23 budget. I'll talk a little bit about some of the increases and decreases here. So these are not all the increases and decreases. These are just some of the significant increases and decreases. As you can see, there's police personnel costs. There's an increase there of about $82,000. That is contractual increases for the Superior Officers Union and also our mental health clinician and administrative assistant. Our small capital, which I'll talk a little bit about later on, we're requesting the same units, same vehicles, same equipment for it. It's just Ford has marked the units up just about over $13,000 for the upcoming year. So that's the reason for that increase. Our professional services, we have our entrance exam and promotional exams every 2 years. They happen to fall at the same time. So this year in August, we will have an entrance exam. That's no cost to the town. The applicants pay for that, but I put it here because it's part of what we do. This company does for us on a biannual, I guess, basis. And they will be doing the promotional exams for our sergeant and lieutenants ranks, which happen sometime in November. So that covers the cost of that, plus the renting of the school and janitorial services. And the overtime increase comes out to just about $13,352. The main increase in that is the average overtime rate, which is about $1 more than it was last year due to the contractual increases. This is just a comparison from FY23 to FY24. As you can see, it details a little bit the increases and the decreases. Our expenditures have gone up just about $10,000, and as you saw in the last slide, just about $9,000 of that is the professional services. Again, our small capital is just about almost $28,000, and our total budget, which includes animal control, is $121,725. I just put this in here, talking about our performance and workload indicators. We responded to just over 14,000 calls, which is a decrease from last year in the amount of calls for service, but in the amount of, I guess, officer hours that it took to actually complete those calls. But it took about 556 hours more than last year. So we don't rely on just the calls for service. Going back to 2020, for example, we were over 20,000 calls for service. We look at that as, more people were home in their house. We had more domestic situations, neighbor disputes, and disruptive behavior at that point. So, and then the year after that, we went down a couple of thousand calls for service. We pride ourselves on actually not going to repeat calls for service. And that was part of our mental health clinician proposal that we back in 2018, because we saw as officers, we were going to the same homes over and over and over again. Now we're able to refer our community to other resources, connect them with our mental health clinician, connect them with our drug prevention coordinator, and try to actually resolve the problem rather than just dealing with the symptoms all the time. So I attribute a lot of the calls for service, the decrease into a lot of that. So I just wanted to kind of give you an idea based on the calls for service, because I'm sure you saw it in our packet. Our small capital request, we're requesting 2 marked units for this upcoming fiscal year. We've been, there's been a delay in the delivery of our marked units over the last couple of years. Our last, I think it was FY22, we didn't get the marked units that we had ordered in July of 2021 until late June of 2022. So, we're actually kind of put behind a little bit. We've been on track to order 2 marked units on an annual basis. Our fleet is in good shape, but we do factor in all the total road miles, idling hours and whatnot as we look at the costs projected to actually repair those older units. We have seen that it's starting to now increase over this past year. If we're unable to, if timing doesn't approve our 2 marked units, next year we can expect to have even, more cost as these marked units go out of warranty. These are the hybrid units as well. We ordered them the last 2 years. They've actually proved to be very beneficial. I think we have saved a significant amount of fuel as well. They perform just as the regular gasoline units. So, saving a significant amount on fuel costs. Anybody have any questions up to this point? I'm going to speak a little bit about our goals coming up for FY24.
Thank you, Chief. To the members of the FinCom and the members, my colleagues on the select board, if you do have a question going along, I should have invited question as you were going along. We typically do it at the end, Chief, but if you have any questions, just raise your hand like Abby's doing, and we'll just recognize you. Mrs. Hurlbut.
Yes, through you to the chief. Chief, when you have idling hours on a hybrid vehicle, does that indicate less wear and tear on the engine?
No, there's a whole formula, as you probably have through our past presentations with Lieutenant Romeo, who recently retired. There's a formula that's used regarding the idling hours versus actual road miles. So when we're looking at that, there's a formula that we use, and Ford provides us with that. So there is wear and tear on the engine. However, with the hybrids, essentially the engine shutting off. So we're this has only been 2 years, so we're not going to really know, maybe for the next couple of years to see what the engine repairs would be down the road. But I would, it would just be an assumption of mine that we're going to see that the maintenance down the road is going to be a lot less than the gasoline engines.
Thank you, Chief.
Sure.
Okay. I should have also noted when we began the meeting that our finance director, Lorianne Galvin, is joining us as well today. So if there's any other input to Ms. Galvin, just jump in. Does anyone else have any questions? I do just have, Mrs. Gonzalez. You're muted.
Sorry. Thank you. I just have a quick, so the cruisers get plugged in when they're not in use? Are they electric?
No.
Oh, okay.
No, the hybrids are essentially when it's idling, similar to how some of the vehicles, when you come to a stop sign, they'll shut off. That's what it typically does when the car's idling. A lot of times in the wintertime, we have laptops, so the cars need to be running at all times so that the vehicle, it's prepared for the officer to respond. A lot of times if they're here, there's an arrest occurring, the cars will be running. Now that the cars are actually, they're, idling in the standby position. So there certainly is going to be a lot less wear and tear that way. Hope that answers your question.
Okay, yeah, I was just confused about the high, I didn't know if they were partially electric and gas, so it's
No,
not
they're not
electric.
electric at all, but they do run that. So they used to have, we used to have the eco system in
Mhm.
the cars, and that really was more for highway traveling. But this is more of it's more to kind of work on that whole idling that,
Okay,
marked units do a lot.
thank you.
Sure.
To my colleagues, any other questions? I don't see any other hands up. I just want to follow up myself. I have two quick questions for you, Chief. Just following up on Mrs. Gonzalez's. So the ones that you showed us that we're waiting on, those aren't hybrids, right?
Yeah, so we started ordering the hybrids in FY23, FY22. So we ended up receiving those. We have two hybrids now. We have two hybrids that are on their way, but they're just not here yet.
Okay.
And this, if we were fortunate enough to have this year's budget approved, we would be at 6 of our 8 marked units at that point would be hybrid.
So are you noticing any issues in terms of the performance of the hybrids versus the regular vehicles?
No, they perform the same. Yeah,
Just as well, speed wise and everything?
yeah, everything is performed the same. We haven't, we're relying on the officers who, it takes a little bit getting used to it, but their performance has been the same so
Okay,
far.
that's great.
And our maintenance, they're under warranty right now, so it's the first 3 years we typically don't have many problems with the cars anyways. Once they start to go out of warranty, then we're going to see. We're getting to that point where I think next year, probably be next June, the first round of the hybrids will be coming. They'll be out of that warranty at that point. And we have looked, and I know there's been questions in the past about whether or not we should get an extended warranty on them. We have looked at that in the past, and it just did not, financially didn't make sense.
Okay, and just one more question in terms of the grant for me, and then I see Mr. Sutherland has his hand raised. One more question on the grants that you were reviewed. I saw the body camera grant. I know there was a timing issue with that. Were you able to submit that? And will we be getting that grant? And if so, when?
Yeah, so we actually, we applied for the grant originally. It did expire, then they offered it again. So we applied for it again. It was approved. And once we sent in the agreement between the superior officers and myself, so we actually have ordered the cameras already. So the money is there. We're going forward with the lieutenants and the chief at this point.
Okay, great. Thank
Sure.
you. Mr. Sutherland.
Just a question on the useful life of the cruiser. So you mentioned 6 out of the 8 would now be hybrid. What's the expected useful life when we make this purchase, or if we do?
They asked, well, so ours are typically 5 to 6 years is the lifespan for the marked units. We're hoping that we stretch that to 6 to 8 years. That's what we're, it all depends on the mileage, and us being a smaller community, our mileage versus some of the larger communities, we just don't put as many miles on it. But we're typically trading the vehicle in and/or repurposing it for town use, right around 60 to 65,000 miles. But with the idling hours, with the gasolines, we were estimating the mileage to be just about 100,000 miles. With this now, I guess this is new to us as well. But there are ways to determine the idling hours on this, and we're so new into it. I'm not sure how long they're going to last. We're hoping that we're going to get at least another year or 2 years out of them. So when we get into the next year and when we have 8 hybrids at that point, we're going to have certainly a full assessment of where the cars stand at this point, idling hours wise, mileage wise, but also repair costs, because that's what determines a lot of whether or not we actually request a unit. There's probably 4 years ago, we didn't request any units because our fleet was in great shape. So there, that may happen at some point in the future. We're hoping it does. We're hoping that these marked units last a lot longer than they have been.
Okay. Thanks, Chief.
Does that answer your question? Thank you.
Yes.
Any other questions?
I don't see any, Chief.
Okay, the package does talk about our accomplishments from last year. Our goals and objectives, we actually work very hard to make sure that the goals are accomplished. We don't just put goals up and it's just wishful thinking. So in your packet, we do talk about our FY23 goals and objectives and where we're at with that. So I'm not going to address it here based upon the time frame, but it is there for you, and I can answer any questions about those as well if anybody has questions about that. But going forward, as the town administrator talked about, and most of you are aware, I am retiring in August of 2023. I think getting into July of 2021, there'll be a transition between myself and the new chief, but that is not going to be a 30-day transition. The transition sometimes takes 18 to 24 months because of new leadership coming in with new ideas, working with the current command staff that we have in place. So I see that as a certainly something that was going to take most of FY24, if not into the year after. As I talked about with the funding sources in FY24, we anticipate openings in the rank of lieutenant and sergeant. We do have officers that are nearing their retirement as well. So the current list both expire in November of this year. We do have a policy in place that governs how promotions will occur based on the town voting to remove our departments from civil service back in 2016. We're able to have our own exam at this point. So certainly it's a quicker process and we're able to control our own destiny since we've moved from civil service. Again, our police entrance exam will occur this year as well. We are working on some marketing to get that out there to the community, to colleges, where you have to be 21 to apply based upon the laws regarding carrying a firearm. We've seen our participation level go from, when we first did in 2016, we had over 250 applicants. The next exam, we were down to about 120. And then our last exam, we had 60 people pass the exam. So we think it's very important as part of making sure that we hire the best candidates to get out there and market ourselves. We are working on that, and we'll continue to work on that going through FY24. We also have specialized training. Part of the leadership change in the department is also making sure that we have leadership training available to not only the command staff, but also our sergeants and our first line officers that are out there, because they're the face of our organization. Every time they meet with the residents, the business community, they're the face that they see out there, not mine all the time. So, this is very important to us to make sure that we're training everybody regarding leadership. So the intentional leadership class is about leading with a purpose. It's a development class designed for our first line supervisors and also the patrol officers that are out there. It helps them become better leaders and prepare for a leadership role in the future. It's part of our whole development of our making sure that we have people in place to take over when somebody does leave or retire. So it does talk about the why of leadership. Why is it important to be a leader? And then the 4 critical components of being a leader, and the importance of being a mentor as well. You don't always have to be the one that's going to be the official designated leader. Just mentoring people is being, being a good leader. And then having those crucial conversations, the ones that I call the courage conversations with people, to let them know where they stand. Those aren't always easy when you're an employer versus an employee, but it's important to have those conversations, and they can be done in a tactful way that there's some learning coming out of that as well. And then our next training is our servant officer. It's the mind of a warrior and a heart of a guardian. It's designed to offer policing in the new era some, ways to connect the officer with the community and help the officers balance their tactical skills that we're always well known for, but developing that people-centric values that's necessary in today's world. So those are 2 important, and it goes hand in hand with our de-escalation training that we do, all the time. We're always looking to de-escalate any situation that they have. But this is just a little bit outside the box type of training that I think it would certainly help the officers connect with the community. And mental health first aid. We're part of the One Mind campaign, which is a national campaign through the internet. It's actually an international, through the International Association of Chiefs of Police. We had joined that campaign 3 years ago. Unbeknownst to me, the mental health first aid actually expires. It's a certification. So we recently had our mental health clinician and one of our sergeants trained to become instructors in this. So we're going to be training our officers in mental health first aid. We also offer this first aid to the fire department as well and the community. So, you may have seen through CIT that, this training has been offered. And we've also trained with and trained some of the school personnel as well. And, as we always do, I know that the slide's been up there every year, but it is important. I think everybody understands that, illicit drug use is a problem, not just here in North Reading. It's a problem everywhere. It's been a problem since, early 2000s. So our goal has always been to minimize the impacts on that on our community. We certainly have taken some big steps with, the support of town meeting by and through the DFC grant to be able to fund not only our mental health clinician, who's also our substance abuse clinician, but to work with schools in our offices to do what we can to not only, certainly we have to enforce the laws, but we're also looking to prevent, and we certainly team up with and provide resources as well. So it's always going to be there. I don't think it'll ever be solved, but we can continue to work towards at least minimizing the negative impacts of it. Because of the timing, I did not invite Amy or Laura, but they have put a lot of work into their goals and objectives as well, and I'm hoping to have them in front of the select board at some point to give an update on things that they've been doing throughout the community, because there's a lot of community presentations that are going on. So, and they work with the community impact team and with our social services within the community to do what they can to make sure that we're trying to touch all the community and do what we can to help out in making sure that quality of life is where it should be.
We'll definitely coordinate that, Chief, because we usually do see them with you. So we would appreciate that, having them come in. We like to hear from them and hear all the things that they've been doing. So we will definitely set that up when they're able to come in.
Thank you very much. So these are some of the, I'm just gonna say Amy's, because we all know she's the drug-free communities director, but she does set goals. And it's part of the grant anyway. So these aren't just goals. She has to provide the data to back it up. once the goals are set, and provide a report as part of the audit for the grant. She has worked with the high school a lot, specifically with the football team this past year. She has what's called a playbook program, and now there's been a request through other coaches to now provide that program to their teams as well. So she has some other goals here that you can see, and I think one of the biggest ones that she's working on is reducing the past 30-day use of marijuana across all grades. She'll provide that information as far as the data goes, but that's a goal that we always want to work on. And Amy is certainly providing the programs to the schools to do that. In our mental health clinician as well, a lot of what she does can't be revealed to the public, and where she does provide a lot of resources, a lot of follow-up, and works with a lot of community members. So I'm going to shut my radio. I'm sorry. So she can see here that she's looking to part of what we've been working on is a first responder wellness program with both police and fire. So she's providing a lot of information to both departments, but we're working mostly on the mental health, physical health, and nutrition health of both police and fire. And she's working a lot more with the library, youth services, and fire department over the last couple of months, but it's certainly a goal of hers to be really entrenched in those departments as well, so they can see some of the benefits that we're seeing here at the police department. And she has some more goals there as well, but just in summary, our proposed FY24 budget reflects an increase of 121,725, just over 2.9% from our appropriated FY23. Even though I won't be here, we did work hard. I spoke with our command staff about what best fits this community going forward. But we believe at this point that what we proposed in today's, not just today's summary, but also for our complete package, that will provide the best means for the department to deliver what we believe is a high level of police services to the community. So I'd like to thank everybody and open up to any questions.
Thank you, Chief. If my colleagues on the Finance Committee or the Select Board could just raise your hand if you have any questions. And also, I'm sure we want to give some comment to the Chief, because this is his unfortunately last budget presentation. Mr. Wallner.
Yeah, thank you very much. And thank you, Chief, for that presentation. Very clear. To your credit, I've always felt like under your leadership, the police department has been very proactive and also very available. And so, to your credit, I've had high confidence in everything you've been doing and appreciating, instead of us having to ask for things to be taken care of, you've been way ahead of the curve. And it shows up, in the mental health efforts that you have going on, in drug reduction, the programs you're working on there, even doing the hybrid vehicles is progressive, and the overtime, to see that, I think it was a 10-year gap. I didn't record the dates down, but to see that it's even lower than it was 10 years ago is exceptional. So I have nothing but applause for everything you're doing, and appreciate everything you've done. I know my wife Joyce will miss you, because you've been available to her on a fairly routine basis. And I know when we had our hit and run right in front of my door right here where I'm sitting, your officers reflected the same culture. So thank you so much for that. For the future, I hope that maybe if it's practical, and I'm trying to think of all the reasons why it might not be, but for the vehicles, maybe at some point we can go all electric, because I certainly know the reliability is extremely high, and you could get even probably 10 years out of them, and there's no question about speed or nimbleness, so it's probably a charging issue as much as anything, but I hope at some point, an all electric vehicle will be considered. So thank you, Chief, very much, and I appreciate all your time and efforts, and I know we have more to go through here, but you've been great from my point of view.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Mrs. Hurlbut.
Yes, Chief, isn't about this year's budget per se, but policing in general in our community. And that is that we're somewhat of a spread out community. We really don't have a downtown area. So although there's a police presence in the schools through the school resource officer, and also in various other capacities with the youth, we don't really have patrols that are going up and down the street as families are going to the grocery store, this or that. So does police presence and getting to know the community that's not causing problems, how do you work with that, given that this is a very different age from when most of us were growing up? And does that come under the servant workshop stuff?
So yeah, certainly we do. We do work with, when I say this, so the senior center, for example, the library, and as you know, the schools, right? So we're always in and out. We visit town hall a lot. We do participate in a lot of community events so for example, we have Toys for Tots that we participate with the fire department. At Walmart, where we have other community events that we do go to. But as far as like a walking beat where you would just go and speak with the business owners, we don't have that in the community. So there's not a real lot of opportunities there. But there is a lot of one-on-one with our offices with the community members. And we do encourage them to do as much as they can. But we can certainly do better, I think. But that is part of what we do every day in developing them and telling them to talk to people, and not just because the time that you may see a police officer might be the worst day of your life, and that's not how we want. We don't want to be in that situation all the time. So yeah, we do like to build relationships, and it's part of what even I think our command staff is really focused on as well. So. Yeah, I think that training will help that as well. Because when you're looking for the bad guy in a marked unit all the time, that does wear on officers as well, because they're always at that hypervigilant, which they have to be. But having windows up all the time and tinted windows in the cars and everything else, you kind of do set that barrier, which we don't want to have. So I agree with you. I think certainly would be beneficial. We do work on it. We do talk to the officers to make sure that they're out there a little bit more. We do a lot of programs here. Even we do a CPR class. We do other community events through the community impact team, which our officers are usually there for. So yeah, there's more can be done though.
And also, Chief, you're the best, and I'm going to be so sad come August.
Yeah.
And you've done a terrific job with your department, and also you yourself with the various committees, including the finance committee and the facilities master plan committee over the years. So it's very sad.
Well, I don't want to go right down the line with everybody, because I do understand that people do appreciate people hard work, but I can tell you the men and women that are with me are going to do just the same. They have that same philosophy as I do. They want to do what's best for the community. When it comes to spending the taxpayers' money, it is like it's our own money. And so I think you're going to see, come August, the department's not going to miss a beat. And that's going to be my legacy walking out the door, is knowing that we all worked hard to get to where we are right now. So thank you.
All set, Mrs. Hurlbut? Yeah. Mrs. Gonzalez.
Thank you for your presentation, Chief.
Sure.
And I don't want to let this go by without being able to thank you also for your leadership, your professionalism. Anytime I've needed to talk to you, you've made time for me. And I just want to thank you for everything you do, and being on the CIT to see, how Amy and Laura work. And it it's actually a model for other communities. And the way it all just works is exceptional. So I just want to thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. I don't see any other hands. I have a couple of budget questions and then I'm gonna continue with what Abby and Leanne and Rich have said, but in terms of the budget, if it's okay, Chief, to go back.
Yeah.
Where so many of the crimes being committed are cyber related, how are you doing in terms of having your staffing trained and up to speed on cyber investigations? And what are you doing in terms of, what is your team doing in terms of, getting everyone that's coming through the door and everyone that's there trained to be able to handle those types of things?
Yeah, so it's a specialized training. We do have one officer that is specialized in it, but our detectives go through the trainings. So we have equipment here that we, without revealing too much, we do have equipment here that does help us with cell phone technology. We have resource partners that help us with computer technology, where we're able to download images and whatnot within seconds, where that used to take many months before. So we're trained, but there are so many specialized units through the FBI and through the state police that we do rely on them a lot, but we work with the DA's office as well. So I can tell you our school resource officer has handled a ton over the last year, as you can imagine, with the technology that the kids are aware of that we're not. Maybe not so much criminal, but just risky behavior that we're able to get with the parents, get them to understand where the lines that they do cross. But also as far as criminal investigations go, we've had a ton because people are getting either through scams. You would think at this point that everybody would be aware of it, but it's just not happening. So we have a lot of people that lose a significant amount of money through online scams, and a lot of them are untraceable because of the anonymous the anonymous sites that are out there that scam people that are providing these scams can go through. But we're able to identify a lot of IP addresses and we do that through search warrants. So I can't say we're experts, but I can say we're probably ahead of many departments in that way. Again, the town has provided us with funding to get a lot of this technology to help us out as well. So
I'd like to see that as a component to getting more of I'd like to see that as an objective or a component, at least in the next budget, or, some sort of forecasting for that, to get more of the team, trained to be experts in that, because that's where so much of this, these crimes or these risks or exposures are, not just, sharing photos, but, attacks on our infrastructure systems from the computer, etc. So and municipal attacks on the system as well. I also wanted to ask you, when you mentioned that you're getting ready to administer the next exam, when is that? Where will it be held, and where can individuals who are interested find information?
So we have not put it out because I think it's too early. So it is going to be in August. If you give me 1 second, I'll actually get you that information. It is going to be August 19th, and it is going to be at the high school. We do have something that we did do the company that actually is doing the exam has put out a poster, but where it's so far away, we're going to get more, I think, more activity as we start to get into the July 1st date, but we will put it out. So it is going to be 9 o'clock in the morning, August 19th at the North Reading High School.
And Chief, can someone, you mentioned age 21, can someone do they have to be 21 at the time of the exam, or can they be about to turn 21? Or
You have to be 21 at the time of the exam.
Okay. And I also just want to continue the accolades. I want to tell you how amazing your communication has been, not just with the board and the town, but with me personally on things. Some people might have an issue and you let me just pick up the phone and call you directly to work it through. I think that's just such an amazing leadership, and what Abby is saying is community policing at its finest. And I know that we are in good hands because of the team that you've been working with that's about to succeed you. I've always felt a great comfort level in all of the leadership at that department. But to lose Lieutenant Romeo and then you, those are kind of two heavy hitters for us. So I know that's not happening yet, but we and it's great that you're moving on to other things. But you should maybe consider sticking around. You can still serve as the director of public safety, I think. So just keep that in mind. But I also just wanted to thank your whole team, and I agree with Mr. Wallner. You're so far ahead. The department was so far ahead of the curve on all of the issues that other departments and the rest of the culture, it seems culturally, people are catching up with. So, from bringing in a youth services coordinator to bringing in a mental health clinician way beforehand, we don't really, we really get so much insight from your team, the team that you've assembled to be able to deal with all of these issues, that it's just a great, like Mrs. Gonzalez says, is a great role model. It sets the bar, I think. So just to congratulate you for what you do as a leader, what the other individuals on your command staff do as leaders. And I really feel like I know the members of your team one-on-one, many of them one-on-one. So it's been a great experience to work with you and to see how you've, kind of led your team like that. So we're sad to see you go, but so grateful for everything that you've done for the community, even though you're not going yet. So
Thank you. Thank you.
all right. Okay. To my colleagues, Mrs. Herbert, do you have something else? Go ahead.
I'm going back, Chief, to Kate's question concerning cybersecurity, and two things. One, I know that there are a number of regional groups, either amongst firefighters or public safety or the police, that you belong to. Does a similar club, for lack of a better term, exist regionally on cybersecurity in which North Reading participates? And my second part is, it seems to me that despite all of the stuff in the papers, that nonetheless there's a certain number of citizens that remain not particularly well educated on cybersecurity and on scams. Are we doing anything at a community level to enhance community education on this kind of thing?
So I'll take the second question. So we've done what we call community advisories. So we'll do that once in a while. That'll be on our Facebook page. I know the transcript does pick it up and prints it for us. But we have presented to the library. We have presented to elder services as well. So we do in the DA's office has actually participated with us as well on those. So we have presented to the community. Yeah, so those are I guess the two questions. So as far as, the second question, as far as the first question goes, yes, we have resources available through various law enforcement. So it's a specialized field, and we're a phone call away from getting that. I know that I can't get into a lot of what we have ongoing right now, but I can assure you everything's being followed up on.
Thank you.
Sure.
Okay. All right, I don't see any other questions, so thank you and your team for joining us this morning. And if there's any follow-up, people can probably reach out to you directly.
Thank you.
Thank
you
you
very
so
much.
much.
And
Thank you all. Thank you all for attending this morning.
I will be sticking around for the fire department's presentation, just so. Thank you.
No problem. All right, and I see our fire chief. Mr. Gilberti, can we turn it right over to Chief Stats?
Yep, let me open up the sharing capability.
Sure, sure. Welcome, Chief.
Thank you. Good morning. Welcome.
Morning.
Should be all set, Chief.
Thank you. Well, good morning, and thank you for the opportunity to present the North Reading Fire Department's fiscal year 24 budget request. I'm the Fire Chief, Don Stats. For this year's presentation, I've been asked to conduct a brief presentation that focuses on the items that are driving any changes to my budget request from FY23 and minimize a review of the past year's accomplishments and statistics. As a general budget statement, the North Reading Fire Department is committed to serving the citizens of North Reading in the most professional, effective, and efficient manner possible. The services that the North Reading Fire Department provides depends on funding from the town, which we treat as and manage as our own through efficient budget management, transparency of what we request and spend, and accountability throughout the budgetary process. I have 3 goals for the North Reading Fire Department in FY24, which all revolve around staffing. I want to add an administrative officer to the department, which you've heard me request in the past 4 budget hearings that are referred to as the day officer. I've been attempting to hire the day officer's position in the last 4 budget requests in order to prepare the community and the department in advance for our current fire prevention officer's retirement, which will occur in early 24. I am also requesting to hire 4 additional firefighters to increase shift strength to 6 by adding an additional firefighter to each shift, while also preparing for an additional retirement also in early 24. And thinking about the best way to approach this presentation, and since it is predominantly about staffing, I felt it's best to examine what our normal staffing level is when all positions are filled, what our current level of staffing is, and where I'm proposing to bring staffing levels to in this request. Normal staffing levels at the North Reading Fire Department when all shifts are filled are the chief, the deputy chief, who is also our fire prevention officer, 4 captains who each run a shift or group and function as the shift commander, and 16 firefighters who are evenly distributed to the 4 groups with 4 on each group. So each group has 1 captain and 4 firefighters for a total of 5, with one of those firefighters remaining at the station during emergencies in order to dispatch the call, and the remaining 4 members responding to the emergency. The fire department's current staffing level is similar, with the exception that we have 4 vacant firefighter positions due to retirements that we've been attempting to fill since November of 21. And as you guys are aware, in some of my past meetings with you, due to the difficulties throughout the hiring process, the fire department has developed a system and an agreement which will chart a path to fill those open positions, which the select board recently approved. And I hope to begin filling those positions shortly. So again, in reviewing, we have 4 open positions, which constitute 20% of our shift staff positions. We have hired 1 new firefighter. He is currently in training and is currently not considered shift strength, and we're still filling for that. So it's been challenging to say the least. For reasons that I will get into in future slides, I am requesting to add 5 positions to the department. I'm requesting to add an administrative officer's position during the day shift as well as 4 additional firefighters, which would give each group 6 firefighters. Excuse me. While I'm requesting to add 4 shift positions in order to increase my shift staffing to 6, what I need is 6 who are available to respond to emergencies, which have increased, as I will show in a future slide, as well as concurrent calls, which have also risen above 400 per year. In the fire department's current configuration, 1 firefighter remains at dispatch in order to dispatch our apparatus, coordinate other resources, and input data into our records management systems, and 4 respond. In order to meet my objective of having 6 staff personnel who will respond to emergencies, the police chief and I will be presenting a strategy for this on April 3rd regarding civilian dispatch. The day officer's position would be a new officer position on the day shift. While I focused on the fire prevention officer training due to logistics beyond my control, the day officer would also have several other responsibilities, filling voids within our department. The department's current fire prevention officer will be retiring in early FY24, and I am at a critical point within the department to plan for his replacement and have the necessary person in place, trained to take over prevention and inspection responsibilities, which is why I'm requesting this position. The day officer's position will provide an additional administrative officer during the day to assist with several different functions, including but not limited to fire prevention inspections, emergency incident management, software integration and management. He would serve as a department liaison, be conducting permitting and licensing inspections, pre-incident planning, community outreach. He would also assist in training and in policy development. As you've heard in my previous budget requests, where I have requested additional personnel, the department has grown increasingly busier while our system of getting off-duty personnel back to the station is stressed and has decreased in dependability for multiple legitimate reasons. This creates potential safety concerns to members of my department and the community when there's not enough staff present to safely handle the next emergency. During those prior hearings, the select board had expressed concerns with hiring additional personnel under the then current language of the contract between the town and the North Reading firefighters. Since that time, through collaboration and partnership between town leadership, consisting of the select board and town administrator and the fire department, an agreement was reached in March of 22, making possible an expansion of the fire department through the necessary contractual changes. The last step of this lengthy process would be an approval by the finance committee, select board, and town administrator to the requested positions. To that end, I felt it important to show a comparison of similar communities, and they're similar in either call volume, population, and/or EMS service level. While I realize there's a lot of data on the screen for everybody to take in and process, the take home here is that the North Reading Fire Department has the least amount of responders of any of the communities represented. And in saying that, and in all fairness, we have different populations, but they're fairly similar. And we also have communities represented here that run, most of them run ambulances, one of them doesn't. But in all of these, the North Reading Fire Department has 4 members responding to emergencies, and the majority of them have 6 or greater.
Chief, can I just stop you there for a moment?
Yes, ma'am.
If you can go back to that, so of that call volume, how much of that call volume, I don't know if you've broken this down, but how much of that call volume is related to our department responding to mutual aid for the surrounding communities? Do you Do you know that figure?
I have it for our past year, so that's roughly 170 calls. And it would be similar for a lot of these communities for the same reasons, Madam Chair, due to staffing shortages, a shortage of EMS providers, whether in the private sector or public sector. So I would anticipate finding similar numbers based on the percentages.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So while comparable communities matter to a degree, what really matters more is what is occurring in our community. As a comparison to more fully illustrate that point and show you how much busier the North Reading Fire Department has become, I conducted a comparison of when I started in 1998 to the end of last year in 2022. So in 98, we had 1,871 calls for service compared to 2,694 in 22. We had 940 medical calls in 1998 compared to 1,638 in 22. Our transport rate increased from 493 to 1,194. And by transports, I mean medical transports to hospitals of patients. In 1998, 50% of our total calls were EMS related as compared to 61% in 22. And we're transporting 44% of the time we go to an emergency compared to 26% of the time in 1998. So our calls for service have increased 31% over that 24-year period. Our medical calls for service have increased 43%, and our transport rate has increased by 59%. So what does this all mean? Obviously, we're much busier than we were in 1998 with a 31% increase in calls for service. What it also means is that we're spending much more time away from the station, transporting patients to the hospital, and oftentimes leaving the station unfilled or short-staffed for longer durations. With my proposed additions and current vacancies, my FY24 budget request is for $5,730,000, which is an increase over FY23 of approximately $1.7 million. The lion's share of that request revolves specifically around additional personnel, as well as filling current open positions, which show in the operational increase of approximately $1.6 million. Fire alarms increase of $24,000 over FY23 includes $22,000 for portable radios for new hires, as well as a $2,000 increase due to an increase in professional services and or contracted services. EMS has increased to $5,000 due to pricing increases in the normal expendables that we use throughout the year. Certainly not an insignificant request by any stretch, but what I would like to point out is that of the increased requests, the majority are one-time costs, meaning you'd only see them in this request and not going forward. Personal protective equipment that each firefighter requires, as well as all of the costs associated with training for new hires, total approximately $1.3 million, which are all one-time costs and will not show up again for these individuals. The actual annual effect to the budget regarding salary and benefits is just under $400,000, which is a 9% increase for 5 additional positions.
Chief, I'm gonna interrupt you one more time, and I'm sorry for doing that, but
That's
Can you-
okay.
I think you've been great with the select board explaining this information, but can you explain to our attendees what your training involves? A lot of people think it's on the job and you hire a firefighter, give him or her their gear and they begin right off the day one. Can you explain the training process so that people understand what it involves? And that may be a lengthy time frame before they're actually on duty for us.
Yes, Madam Chair, thank you. So training for a fire department member here in North Reading, due to our shift staffing model where we basically replace like in kind when somebody leaves, it is fairly lengthy. So we have approximately a 10 to 12 week on the job training cycle within the department, with OSHA training and other mandated trainings that we have to conduct internally. And then we have to train them to basically take over or be proficient at one of our 4 positions that we have within the department to function. So they're not on shift right away. So on top of that, they are also required to attend the Massachusetts Firefighting Academy, which is a 10-week program right now, and may or may not have to attend paramedic training as well. So with all that being said, because they're at some point considered shift strength, there's a pretty expensive requirement that we cover the shifts to maintain our current 5 position staffing model throughout this entire process, and that truly drives the cost up significantly. Madam Chair, did that explain that?
Yes, thank you. Appreciate
You're
it.
welcome.
Thank you.
So of those one-time costs, $330,000 of that, which include costs associated with paramedic training, if necessary, will be covered by the ambulance revenue account. The remaining balance, which covers pre-employment medical exams and all firefighting equipment and training costs, would be covered within the fire department budget through this request. Ambulance collection has consistently averaged within the 80th percentile in collections over the past 5 years. So when I identify that as a source to alleviate some of these costs, I felt it important to illustrate the fact that the collection process has been very successful, and this has been a 5-year snapshot of that.
Right.
I think it's also important to show that while that's collection has been successful, we have taken, and the town transfers money from that to supplement our budget as well as funding different purchases. And this is important to show, like in 21, in this 4-year snapshot, we purchased an ambulance. There is a recovery period and the account continues to grow, making this a legitimate source for these costs. So in summary, in order to future-proof the department, maintain professional level of service to the community, there has to be a certain level of succession planning that occurs in advance of known retirements and departures. This is exactly what I've been attempting to do in hiring the day officer's position, which requires a significant amount of training in fire prevention codes, both formally and through credentialing process and through on-the-job experiences and training. Hiring 4 additional firefighters to increase shift strength to 6 enables the fire department to function more safely and efficiently due to the increase in calls for service, and work away from our current callback system that has not been nearly as robust as it once was. And the department struggles to get off-duty personnel back to the station in a timely manner. This is a path that the town officials embarked on jointly with the fire department and worked collaboratively with through a successful negotiations process that ended in March of 22 and has led us to this request. I thank you for your time, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Chief. We're gonna begin with Mr. Kelleher.
Thank you, Chief. Great presentation. Just so I understand the timing of when new firefighters actually go on shift. You've got 10 to 12 weeks of on-the-job training, some more training internal, I believe you said, before they would go to the firefighter school or to the paramedic school. When do they, at what point in this process are they available to be on shift and relied upon as an active firefighter?
Thank you, Mr. Keller. The firefighters will go through on-the-job training. And of course, the 10 to 12 weeks is approximation because different people come in with different levels of experience. And until they are proficient in one of our positions, which generally has been dispatched in the past, but right now with different levels of EMS experience coming through, it could be possible that they're ready for a different position first. But that time frame is generally 10 to 12 weeks.
Okay, so that'd be before they go to the academy.
Prior to the academy, that is correct. So I can't request an academy position until I actually have somebody hired. That's the way the Massachusetts Firefighting Academy works. So I cannot, if I know that I have 2 people retiring next year, I can't request a position today for that. I actually have to wait until there's somebody hired.
So after the 10 weeks, it may be some period of time before they actually get to go to the academy.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. That was helpful.
All set, Mr. Kelleher.
Yes, I am. Thank you.
Chief, can you just add to that, how often the academy runs trainings? How many times a year can you enroll prospective members in the academy, or actually employees in the academy?
The academy runs, I believe, 4 to 6 recruit classes, just depending. They have not increased their enrollment size since COVID, which we're all trying to figure out why. So basically, since COVID occurred, they cut their class size in half, which has created a gigantic backlog, obviously, in attendees.
So you have to wait to be able to get someone into an academy.
That's correct.
Okay. And Mrs. Hurlbut.
Yes, Chief. If we were to go to regional dispatch, right now you have, if you had a complete, if everybody was in place, you would have 3 out and 1 to answer the phone, so to speak, 1 to do dispatch. Is that correct?
Are you referring to our current configuration?
Right. If the 4 empty spots were filled,
Yes.
not
Yeah.
the new firefighters, but the vacancies that you currently have.
Yeah, so with our current configuration, we have a shift. Each shift has 5. And 1 person stays at dispatch with 4.
So you have 4 out and 1 in.
Correct.
So if you go to regional dispatch, you will no longer need 1 in, so you would have 5 out. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. And then concerning regional dispatch, will some of the responsibilities of the regional dispatch data keeping or whatever else become part of the duty of the day officer? I understand that the day officer is not going to answer the phone, so to speak, but there are a certain number of tasks associated with regional dispatch that occur at a local level, and will those responsibilities to some degree fall under the day officer's responsibilities?
The day officer's responsibilities, the only cross there would be with records management systems integration. And that is not so much inputting, which is the dispatcher's job, but ensuring quality control, which would fall on our end. And that's what I'm really looking for, that we need more attention to.
And then concerning the paramedics, it's we or your department had made every effort with new hires to have them come in already certified as paramedics. And my understanding is that right now it's very hard to find a potential firefighter that comes with paramedic training, and that means that it becomes a whole new issue. Besides going to the firefighting academy, you also have to become trained as a paramedic for as long as we're running ALS services. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And do you have any idea why it is so difficult to find firefighters or individuals that wish to become firefighters that already have paramedic training?
Yeah, that's a multifaceted answer. So right now, there has been a general decrease in newly certified paramedics and EMTs nationwide, and there's been a large decrease also in recertification. So people that are continuing to maintain those certifications. So there's been a drop nationwide in these people that have a very specific and more advanced skill set. So of those people that currently keep them, they have the ability to shop around basically for the best place to work. And they're basically interviewing the departments to find out where they want to work because we need their skill set.
So can you attribute the decline in available paramedics to be commensurate with the decline in nurses available because of experiences during COVID?
I don't necessarily think it is entirely due to COVID as far as the paramedic end of it, but I don't know. And I don't know if it would be an apples to apples comparison to the nursing staffs as well.
And then one point of interest, you gave a slide comparing 1998 with 2022 or 23. And the population of North Reading in 1998 was 13,000.
Mhm.
Now about 15.3, but that's a 2-year-old number. It's probably
17,000.
Say what?
17,000.
Right. So that's despite the fact that your department has grown quite a bit and has had increased responsibilities, it's also been an increase in population, for whatever that's worth. But thank you very much for your presentation. It was great, Chief.
Thank you.
Mr. Kelleher.
Yeah, thank you. Just a follow-up to Abby's question on paramedics. I'm wondering, is the shortage of paramedics at all due to qualified people going to private ambulance companies because they may pay a higher salary than local fire departments do? Is that a factor in this?
No, Mr. Kelleher, it's not. It's a great question, but the private companies are in as much of, or sometimes a worse position than we are. And we are actually finding ourselves backing up or responding to assist private ambulance companies because that's what's mandated by law. And they're certainly struggling to meet their obligations to each community that they contract with.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Mr. Kelleher, all set? Mr. Sutherland?
Thank you. I didn't appreciate before looking at this the significant investment from a dollar's perspective it takes to bring somebody on. Do you have a sense of what our attrition rate has been and what it will be? I know you mentioned earlier that you think there's like a one-time cost, and this will certainly be a surge. Have you looked forward the next 3 years to what our attrition rate may be, just to understand if we think we might have a similar hurdle in the next several years?
Over the next year, we're having 2 more retirements.
Yeah, say the next 2 to 3 years. Like you mentioned, you have about $1.3 million in bringing new trained personnel in. How we look forward, and you mentioned this is probably a one-time cost for this year's budget request, but have you looked forward to the next 2 to 3 years? Do you think we'd have similar requests based on attrition, retirements, your average attrition rate, just trying to get a sense for kind of where the force is and where we think we are moving forward. Because I don't think anybody, I certainly didn't appreciate the training cost, and obviously we need them, but that's a significant cost to bring somebody in.
Yeah, it is a significant cost, Mr. Sutherland, and I have looked forward and I have developed a strategy that I will be presenting in the future as a way to mitigate that, or a lot of it. And over the next 2 to 3 years, we should have another potentially 4 retirements. When people reach a certain point, they have the ability to retire, and they usually do that based on where they are in the pension system. And sometimes it's difficult to anticipate when somebody will retire. So we ask for as much notification as we can, but it's still a moving target, so to speak.
Okay, and then one other follow-up. You showed from 1998, which was helpful. Have we seen an uptick in calls with the 2 larger properties on the west side of town with the Edgewood and Pulte? And do you have a breakdown like that, trying to understand as we add properties in what impact that has to the fire department? Those are large, rather than the single family homes, which 2 or 3 homes here or there go in, but we have a large number of units going in all at once.
Yes, that is correct. I don't have that with me today. I have done that in past presentations, and I'm happy to provide that for you outside of this presentation. But that's something that I certainly want to address with the town administrator and the town leadership going forward as these new properties come on, because I think it's something that we haven't really discussed at length about how these properties do impact the infrastructure and the services the town provides.
Thank you, appreciate that.
All set, Mr. Sutherland? All set?
Yeah, thank you.
And Chief, there was at one point with regard to Edgewater and Edgewood, the uptick in the calls billing directly for those to Edgewood, correct?
Correct.
Okay, we're gonna go to Mr. Wallner.
Yeah, thank you, Chief, for that presentation. A lot of stats there. And being a stats guy myself, I have a lot of questions, but I don't think this is the appropriate venue to dig into every slide. And I know that I've known you long enough to know that you're working very hard to, increase safety. How can I say, improve services for the fire department as far as servicing the town. So, I'm always under the impression that maybe we've been kicking the can down the road years prior, and that you're trying to catch up, which puts you in an unenviable position, frankly. But thank you for doing that. So when I look at the stats, the thing that's got my most attention is is increasing staff by 4 people. And so this is, I'm not in your shoes. I don't understand all the technicalities of what is justified, but when I have seen calls around town and I know what the issues are, I see a lot of equipment that shows up for some things that I'm wondering, why do we have so much equipment there? And, and when we're talking about people showing up, it's taking people out of the station, which is what you're concerned about, and they have to be there. And so to really understand I'm trying to, synthesize this on the spot here, but to really understand by types of calls. We don't have a lot of fires in town. Obviously, if you had a fire, everybody's going out, right? I get that. That totally makes sense. But we have many, many other calls that fall in different categories, if I was to classify it. And I'm wondering, how many times do you really have to empty the station? That would be a requirement, as opposed to sometimes I'm under the impression, I'm probably wrong, but sometimes I'm under the impression it's like, we have nothing to do. Let's go out and let's go see what's going on, and let's just because we train all day long. We kind of want to get out in the field and do things. So I'm not trying to insult you or anything close to that, but to increase the staff, which has a significant impact on the budget, and to sustain that going forward, I'd want to know that we really need to go up by staff, and by the type of call, we need to send out, more people than we're used to, or that every call requires everybody to go out. So, again, I don't think we're going to solve that today, but that's kind of in the back of my head. I would sure like to know what that looks like Because like Abby was mentioning on that one slide, our population has gone up, by the numbers 30%. I'm wondering what our staff was at that point for the fire department. So if I start breaking into the stats, it would be a more extensive discussion than we probably have right now, but you get my overall concern, I assume.
I do get your concern, Mr. Wallner. Just to briefly address that, we send out what we need for the potential many times. For the potential of what we're responding to, whether it's a gas leak inside a house that incident could expand, or we have the potential for a fire. Everything that the fire department does is extremely manpower intensive. The equipment that we use is all heavy and takes a lot of hands to move it efficiently and safely, for lack of a better way to describe it. And there's no way that I can impress that upon you without actually having you handle the equipment, and you could actually see for yourself what that entails. It's extremely exhausting, and that's why we train, and that's why I need more people to do this safely. And as you can see with the increase in calls, it's not going to get any slower. Like I said, we always prepare for the potential. We don't send everything out on every call. That is not true. And we have specific criteria for specific emergencies. And that's what we adhere to, with the hope that we don't have to use them, to be honest with you,
Yeah.
But we have to be prepared.
Yeah. I would like to know if it's an easy doc. I'd love to see that doc, what the criteria is, just for my own education. And so I appreciate your response on that. But I would like to know more about that in order to feel good about increasing staff, because it is a significant impact. And I suspect that of all the departments we're going to see, yours may be the largest increase we see. I'm not sure, but that's my guess. So anyways, I appreciate your attention to that. Thank you.
The NFPA standards is a whole book, Mr. Wallner. So I think that's you could probably borrow it online, rent it from Amazon. But other than that, I think. Go ahead, Chief. I'm sorry.
Madam Chair, through you, and just referencing the NFPA, which I wasn't going to, because to your point, it is extensive. But for the occupancies that we have within the community, which are classified the majority as low hazard to some medium hazard occupancies, NFPA criteria states that we'll get 15 to 28 members on scene for those types of emergencies or those call outs. And that's extensive. That's a lot more than what I'm requesting. And I think it speaks to everything that I've said in answering that question. So we can get into that discussion further, to your point.
Mr. Wallner, are you all set?
Yes, I am. Thank you.
Any other questions? We also a community that has a water body running through it. We have water response it's due, and all of these other types of things that may not be comparable to those other communities, even though they were used in your slide. But there's other factors, I think, that go into the increase in calls, not the least of which is the increase in population. But that's more of an esoteric discussion. Let's get back to budget questions. All right, so we have
Nope, you're on mute, Kate.
Mrs. Hurlbut. Sorry about that. Mrs. Hurlbut.
Yes, getting back to Mr. Sutherland's observation concerning the cost of bringing in firefighters going forward as more firefighters retire. My understanding is that while we have to, the salary would transition over to the new hires, so the 300,000 or whatever that number was on the right-hand column of that sheet basically does not follow when you hire four firefighters to replace existing firefighters, that those additional costs on that table were if you bring in more firefighters than you currently have. So yes, there's a huge cost in outfitting and training new firefighters, but that are replacing retirees, but that there isn't a huge salary increase since they're basically taking the salaries of those that are retiring. So Mr. Sutherland's concerned that going forward in 3 or 4 years, if we have a bunch more firefighters retired, it's not necessarily going to cost the entire amount, both sides of the equation. Am I correct?
That is correct.
Chief,
Thank
can
you.
you go back to that slide as we're discussing it? Excuse me, Mrs. Robert, I'm sorry. You might as well go back to that table so that we can each have a frame of reference on it.
I believe this is the one.
Right, yes. And so I realize that the annual costs there include the day officer, but in fact, that number does not carry forward when you are replacing existing firefighters. The other question I have concerns paramedics. The paramedics are not separate from firefighters, are they? In other words, we're training firefighters to be paramedics. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Thank you.
Mrs. Robert, all set?
I am indeed. Thank you very
All right.
much.
Mr. Gilberto?
Excuse me. Thank you, Madam Chair. A question for the chief as a follow-up to the discussion prompted by Mr. Wallner's discussion and your comment about the NFPA standard. Through you to the chief, you referenced the 15 to 28 person range for response for emergencies of the type expected in our community. And we've talked often in this forum and in other places about the nature of the change in the way the department functions and the structure of calling off-duty firefighters to respond. Could you comment about how that has changed over the course of the past generation and how it may continue to change?
Yes. So again, using 1998 as a benchmark of when I started, our current system to call back off-duty personnel, we refer to as the callback system. And that includes both for covering personnel when they're transporting outside of town by ambulance, meaning we need to fill our shift staffing back to normal levels of 4, or whether we have an anticipated or we get a call for a potential large-scale emergency like a house fire or a water rescue incident, and we need to recall the entire department. So when I say the callback system, I'm referring to both ways that we get people back to the department to supplement the on-duty staff. The system has basically eroded over time over the past 20 years in my experience, and is a lot less dependable than it once was when I first started here. And that's for multiple legitimate reasons. You know, people's priorities have changed, and people have been forced to move out of town because to less expensive communities because it costs obviously a lot more to live in North Reading, comparably. And that's just what I've noticed over time. And it's something that we need to recognize and adapt to. The callback system served the community for many, many years and allowed the town and the department to basically operate with pretty much a skeleton crew. You know, to Mr. Wallner's point, the 1998 comparison, we had 4 people on duty with 3 that were responding. And in my career, that shift has grown by 1, which is helpful by all stretch during an emergency. You know, with the first arriving company, you have another set of hands that can help. However, it doesn't help me get another truck on the road with the duty staff. So it has become less dependable. Again, not anybody's fault, just a change, I think, in priorities and culture, and that, you know, it has basically, again, just become less resilient over time.
Thank you.
All set, Mr. Gilberto. Okay, and excuse me, Mr. Wallner?
Yeah, just an add-on question. Thank you, Chief. With the increase in staff, would it benefit us at all from a overtime situation? Would it help us, you know, would that help us on the other side? Because overtime is a significant part of your budget. Would there be any upside from that point of view?
Yes, there would. So part of the collaboration between the department and town leadership through the negotiations process was trying to come up with a fair system that as we added staff, there was a decrease in dependency on off-duty personnel. And as we added staff, there would be a level system, so to speak, or a step system, so to speak, of not calling back based on what we have available on duty. And that starts at 6 firefighters available to respond to emergencies.
That'd be another thing I'd like to learn more about as we get into this deeper. Thank you.
All set, Mr. Wallner?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Mrs. Hurlbert, and then I would like to ask some budget questions myself and find out if any other FinCom or Mrs. Gonzalez have any questions, but Mrs. Hurlbert, go ahead.
Yes, regarding overtime, while I understand that there would be some savings in overtime, we nonetheless have to have a certain amount of coverage for vacations and sick pay, et cetera, sick days, et cetera, for new hires that are in addition to those same overtime issues with the existing staff. But I have the other observation or question is concerning regional dispatch. If we go to regional dispatch and we have an additional man out, that should also save on overtime to some limited degree. Is that not the case?
No, because at that point, we're capturing that person as part of our now new shift strength of 6, I would anticipate at that point.
No, but 6 assumes you have 4 new hires. If you don't have 4 new hires, but you do go to regional dispatch,
Yes,
then you have 5 out, right?
yes, I do.
Instead of what you have now, which is what, 4 out.
Correct.
Okay, so if you have 5 out, then you should have a decrease in overtime.
No, I still don't think I will at that point because my shift strength is now at 5. So I'm not anticipating dropping back to 4, if that's what you're asking.
No, I'm simply asking if there's a decrease in overtime if you go to 5 out due to the acceptance of regional dispatch.
You mean not Mrs. Earl, but if, in other words, if the individual that remains at the station currently is able to go out and answer.
Right. Correct, because if we go to regional dispatch, then we no longer have to have an active firefighter sitting at the fire station doing dispatch while the rest of the guys are on the truck, so to speak. So it seems to me that you would have more available firefighters with regional dispatch without any new hires. And I'm not suggesting you shouldn't get new hires. I'm just making an observation that going to regional dispatch, from what I'm seeing, should also, to a limited degree, cut down on some overtime because you'll have more available firefighters to go out.
I think I was taking that the wrong way as far as, or interpreting it the wrong way as far, I was looking at vacation time or what we had just prior been talking
No,
to you
the
prior.
vacation time remains the same.
Correct. The only area that could possibly impact is probably in ambulance coverage. That's about the only place where I may be able to decrease by 1 instead of requesting most of the time 2 personnel to come back, and that might help in that capacity.
Thank you.
So that's just for the callback costs, right, Chief?
Correct.
The extra callback. Mrs. Hurlbert, you all set?
Yes, thank you.
Now, do any of my colleagues on FinCom or or on the select board have any further questions?
I'm all set, Madam Chair.
And I do have some questions. If we can, actually, I'm just going to direct it right to first of all, let me just get to regional dispatch, because I also think since we have FinCom here and the select board here, we would also have to contemplate the, once we, if and when we entered into an IMA for that, we would be paying a membership fee for that. So there's another cost attendant to that that we would have to factor in. I know it's not necessarily related to personnel, but I don't think it's just a 1-for-1, Mrs. Hurlbut. In other words, since we go to we go to a regional dispatch, we're gonna save money here or there. I don't know that it's gonna translate because we're gonna have to pay a member fee to participate in that. So we would have to budget for that as well. But getting back to, first of all, getting back to your right now, your current decrease in staffing. The chief, I think something that didn't come across in this presentation that has come across clearly in your multiple interactions with the select board is that there is a significant amount of fatigue for the current membership there that is stepping up to the plate to, you know, work all this overtime and work all this extra time to fill that gap. So there is an immediate need for us to get those positions filled. And certainly if you had, in my opinion, if you had an expansion of staff, that would also in the future alleviate that, and you could maybe plan, you know, have some planning down the line so that we're not stuck in this predicament that we're in right now. So in my mind, you are putting in a certain number to replace what's missing there. But I wanted to ask you specifically on this slide, or maybe Mr. Gilberto or Mrs. Galvin, where would these one-time costs come from? And for number one, number two, for purposes of what you're asking for right now for these one-time costs, is that only to fill what's existing right now that's vacant, or is that for all of these positions that you're also proposing? And number three on this slide, I'm hugely concerned because we are at a budget shortfall and we annually have a budget shortfall. Where is that extra money going to come from? And we have to project in the future. This year, what you're proposing might be 398, but in the future with increases and, you know, collective bargaining increases, et cetera, where is that money going to come from? Because we don't have enough revenue to sustain that. So I'm looking to get some budget information on how are we going to pay this and how are we going to pay it moving forward, setting aside the need because we clearly have a need. My other questions to you go back to this NFPA. Before I start to read all of this inaccurate stuff or people contact me because they've read some crazy things online, we are properly staffed and securely serving the community. I want you to confirm this because now there's going to be a question. Oh, the chief said that there needs to be 12 to 30 people responding and we only have 3. How are we, whether we're properly staffed to handle fire service within the community, number one, setting aside the gap in staffing, which we know needs to be corrected. I want to make sure we are responding correctly with the correct apparatus and the correct number of individuals so that I don't get phone calls about people now posting crazy things on social media to try to direct the narrative into inaccuracy, into the land of inaccuracy. So I know that's about 17 questions in one, but if you could try to address those for me, I would appreciate it.
I will. And thank you for saying that about the current staff. You know, they are fatigued. And to that point, and that kind of goes hand in hand with one of your other questions regarding our current staffing. Our shift staffing cannot fall below 5. That's our minimum. That's what we maintain. And my department members are being very proactive in filling all of the vacant positions. And they are fatigued. It's been a year and a half of trying to fill, or beginning a year and a half, trying to fill these vacancies. What we discussed and finally got approved on Monday, I felt went a long way into helping us secure those positions and getting that filled. And I appreciate that, which is why I didn't happen to mention it in this presentation. So it was addressed and that was great. We are staffed properly at this time, and we are responding as we have been. It's just the staff is fatigued. When I reference those numbers or the NFPA, yeah, that's what they recommend. I'm not saying that North Reading can justify that based on our call volume by any stretch, but it also relies on mutual aid companies to come in as well and help. And that's what we have available to us. Our mutual aid network is robust, and we depend on it every day, and they depend on us every day. And again, my concerns are, as I've stated, when we're out handling something and we don't have a sufficient amount of off-duty personnel that we've been relying on for all these years, that just is not as dependable as it once was. That's all.
So Chief, just to that point again, before this goes all the way in the direction of social media wasteland, the other communities, at least our surrounding communities, if you can confirm and give us more input on this, are really relying as well on us. One of the slides you didn't have in here this year was the number of mutual aid calls that we make to our surrounding communities. So in order to get that level of services and that level of, firefighters out there, other communities don't put 30 people out on a response to a call either. They're calling for those bodies to come in from other communities, just like we're doing. And that is an acceptable form of addressing emergency calls as well. I just want to make sure we're putting out the accurate information. We're not doing anything wrong or against the regulations, or we're in that much of a deficiency that we really have to rely on surrounding communities. But one of the things you used to produce to us was how many other communities rely upon us to fulfill their firefighting service needs as well. And I didn't see that in here. Might be in the bigger budget book, but I just want to make sure you say that comes from your mouth, not my mouth, but that we're correcting any kind of issue with regard to any of the comments that were made here.
No, Madam Chair, you're exactly correct on that. A big reason why, and number one, I was keeping this presentation shorter, as per the directive or the suggestion. What really speaks to this point is that, and why I don't feel it's necessary, if you want to see the statistics, that's fine. I have no issue by any stretch, but we rely on it, and every other community relies on that same network. And it's just the way the fire service within Massachusetts conducts itself and conducts its business, because no one community, especially the smaller type communities, can't sufficiently staff up to those numbers. I mean, you have an anomaly here and there that they come close to, but they don't meet the pure NFPA 1710 requirements, for lack of a better way of saying it. It's not a requirement. We don't adopt NFPA. However, it is a standard that is used.
Now, is there an ability for you to just direct and maybe answer these? How are we going to pay for this? That's what this is. This meeting is. How are we going to pay for this one-time cost? I don't know if it's better directed to Mr. Gilberto or Mrs. Galvin, but in terms of thinking, yeah, Mrs. Galvin, thank you. I know you probably have thought this through, so.
Thank you. The one-time cost, I believe the chief showed a slide, just over 300,000, anything related to the paramedic training and tuition, that type of thing, we would take out of the ambulance fund. The remaining costs, similar to what we have done over the last 2 years, actually, we had these proposed retirements. Unfortunately, they backed up and end up all in 1 year in terms of where the recruit training ended up. But in the past 2 years, we did fund the training portion out of free cash. It was in the salary pool rather than the fire budget. So we would probably have to address that, the one-time cost related to recruit training for all of the positions, both the replacements and the new hires, with free cash.
Okay.
As far as funding the annual cost of the salaries, we have not determined how we are going to do that yet.
Do you think, and I don't know if you've looked at these numbers with the chief, but do you think that that's sustainable through the revenue that the ambulance program generates?
Yes. the ambulance program, and I believe he put up that slide too, has been generating about $900,000 a year. We've been taking around $650,000 a year to fund the fire budget. So between what is accumulated there and what we're likely to make in a year, even assuming if we have to purchase an ambulance in 2025, we should be able to afford it. And
Okay.
then depending on what the new hires, if they have their paramedic incentive and that type of thing, we'd have to see what we take out of the ambulance fund going forward. We might be able to raise that amount a little bit depending on what is attributable to EMS or ALS.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you for
You're
that.
welcome.
And then, Chief, I had a question about the day officer, and this might seem, so if he or she wants you as, if you had this position for a day officer, is his or her shift going to be, just a regular 8-hour shift Monday through Friday? What was your thought in terms of that position? Because you've mentioned this before to us. You've asked for this before. And it seems to be more of an administrative function to assist the chief with those kind of day-to-day operational matters, and not necessarily someone, although they might be trained, but not necessarily someone that's going and responding to emergency. Do I have that wrong?
No, that is correct. So all of us respond to emergencies as depending on the situation, right? So the day officer, and you are correct on that, would be primarily an administrative officer during the day that would be able to help me and help the deputy chief in all of those other, and there's a lot of other responsibilities that we're responsible for, and at times we're not getting to as efficiently as we could. And, while he would be focusing on all of those other responsibilities that I've listed in that slide, I really need him to get up to speed and to assist in fire prevention. So that I honestly have no control over their training. When the credentialing process and the way the fire academy conducts classes and the backlog that's been created, I need to have a person trained and credentialed in that. And then on top of that, he would be assisting, like I said, with records management systems, quality control issues as far as training goes, and assisting the training officer and making sure that it's being conducted on every group appropriately, as well as permitting and licensing inspections. So he'll certainly be busy, but it would certainly help us out a lot in the day-to-day management of the department.
And I just have, I think one more question to you too. In terms of the additional, in terms of the additional staffing levels, I know we've been in some active review for a long, long time, since before COVID, of these improvements that are absolutely necessary, even if we don't add more staff, the necessary staff, but they're absolutely necessary to improve the quality of the building and the size of the building to be able to accommodate the apparatus that we've all been talking about this for a while. But in order to add this new staff, even though there's a long-term, this is maybe a long-term plan, even if you put it in this budget and you're already having difficulty soliciting candidates as it is, but if there's a long-term plan, don't we have to have those building improvements completed first, or do we not need that to be able to? I know we need it just for the apparatus itself and the living conditions of our firefighters, but do we need that to be completed to add, let's say, the 5 additional staff members that you're looking for?
Ideally that would be wonderful, but this fire department can adapt and accommodate 1 extra person per shift. Of course, it's going to get tighter, but we can do it as long as we know that there's a long-term plan to alleviate that.
Okay, all right. And and I'll just add finally, because we did talk about this, that we can guess why we're not getting, qualified candidates or highly trained candidates. We can, I haven't studied it. I'm sure somebody will. We've read about the Great Resignation. Everybody's had a shift from COVID, but I really don't think it's a surprise that there may be some, there may be less employment capability out there because these are our people that were the front line responding for the past few years to COVID-19. And even within our own employment ranks, people have decided they're going to totally take a shift, but it doesn't, to me, it's not a surprise that other people don't want to stand up to do that duty. But I hope that with these kind of couple of things that we've worked out with the union, being willing to work them out, that kind of generates more interest in serving, and that gives you some more viable candidates for serving. But it's not really a surprise that people have entirely pivoted as a result of COVID, and where this job is the one where they're first responding to everything, including a time we didn't even have vaccines for COVID. So it's not a shocker to me. And I do want to just thank you and your team for making these resolutions with us to be able to move forward and address these issues, because it's a big deal for us. It was a big deal for a long time for us. So hopefully it gives you and them some ability to bring some more candidates on quickly.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, so let's go to Mrs. Gonzalez and then Mrs. Hurlbut.
Thank you,
Mrs.
Madam
Gonzalez.
Chair. Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Chief, for your presentation. A lot of this has been already gone over with the select board, and we're familiar with a lot of it. I have a question. The Madam Chair brought up that we've seen that day officer position asked for before, and I'm just curious, was that not done because was that a funding issue, or were you having a hiring issue for that position?
It was not a hiring issue from my end, so I'll defer to the town administrator or the acting finance director, but I believe it was a funding issue.
Mr. Gilberto.
That's correct. Yes, through you, Madam Chair.
Okay.
Mrs. Gonzalez,
All right. Thank you.
are you all set?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, Mrs. Hurlbut.
Through you to the chief, my understanding is that in the past, the deputy chief has been in charge of fire prevention, and that's a fairly large job, that it goes way beyond somebody coming out, which would not be the deputy chief, to check, for example, house fire alarm systems, that this is more commercial fire prevention. Is there and I understand that that's an important job, and it takes up a certain amount of time. Is there a cost for certification for fire prevention for an incoming day officer?
There is no cost for the training through the Massachusetts Firefighting Academy.
So this new hire as a day officer would be trained by the deputy chief? How would he acquire the skill set necessary to do the fire prevention currently handled by the deputy chief?
So through a combination of, as you've just pointed out, on-the-job training with the deputy chief, as well as enrolling him in the fire prevention officer classes through the fire academy. And they offer 2 levels of credentialing for that specific position, which he would need to go to.
And is there a cost involved?
There is no cost involved for that.
Okay. And concerning paramedic training, assuming that you aren't able to hire firefighters that come in with paramedic training, could you address the cost of paramedic training, please?
Sure. The cost for enrollment in paramedic training is $15,000 per student, and that's just for the class. Coverage, paramedic training coverage for the 5 new positions, I think, is approximately $250,000. And then for existing positions, it is roughly, if I remember, what we did was we covered 5 positions, not knowing who would be hired with paramedic level credentials already, or who would be paramedics already, and who would have to send. So we took an average of what we currently have vacancies for and what I've requested. And that number we came up with was 5.
My understanding is that the one new firefighter hire actually does have paramedic training. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And how many paramedics do we currently have among firefighters on staff?
Firefighters on staff, we have 14 paramedics.
Thank you, Chief.
You're welcome.
All set, Mrs. Hurlbut?
Yes, I am. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, and to my colleagues on FinCom or Select Board, are you all set? Any other questions from my colleagues? All right, Chief, any closing remarks?
No, I would just like,
Madam Chair.
Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Gilberto, I apologize. Mr. Gilberto?
It's okay. There is a question in the chat from Maureen Doherty. I don't know if you want the chief to respond to that.
I mean, this is really an opportunity for our Select Board and FinCom to get some budget questions answered, but if you want the chief to answer it, Mr. Gilberto, you could, why don't you read it to him?
Sure.
I guess if it's something he can even answer right now.
Sure. So Chief, can you see that question?
I cannot.
Okay. It says Chief Stats is Maureen Doherty, the North Reading transcript. I have one follow-up question regarding the department's response to calls with equipment that may appear to passersby as being too much. To what extent does the fact that when your duty crew is on a call across town, the department needs to be prepared for the possibility of a concurrent call coming in when personnel or equipment would be needed to respond? Is it more efficient to have the fire truck manned and able to leave one incident and go immediately to another, as opposed to sending a firefighter back to the town center to get into a larger piece of equipment? Thank you.
Chief,
Maureen,
can you answer that one?
I can. It's a good question, and it kind of speaks to what Mr. Wallner was talking about earlier, which I was going to discuss with him at a future time. But Ms. Doherty hit it on the head. So with our on-duty staff, we get concurrent calls all the time. So we could be on a medical aid, and then we at the same time get a call for a fire alarm activation, and we're going right to that scene from the prior call. It happens every day. And that's exactly why we take the apparatus that we do. And that's what every fire department does. And that's what we have to do due to our staffing.
We have a well-trained and highly responsive fire department. They're not jumping on equipment and responding just because it's there. I mean, I don't even know why this is veering off into this direction. For, no pun intended, but they know what they need to get to use for equipment to respond. And they know who needs to respond, and they know when they need to call people back. So I don't understand why members of the public perceive that there's too many apparatus. I don't know where that's coming from. But I don't want that to be coming from any type of select board intimating that that's. I don't want that coming from the select board. I don't understand it. I don't know why it's even coming up in this budget discussion. I don't get it. We know that they know what they're doing, and we know that they know how to respond, and they're not just taking equipment out just for the sake of taking equipment out. I don't even know where that's coming from. That's never been on any kind of budget discussion about our fire department in terms of anything. So I'd just like to end it here with saying that's wrong. I don't know why we're even talking about it here in the context of reviewing the fire department budget. We shouldn't be basing a budget on whether or not we think or public thinks they're using too much equipment responding to a call, because that's absurd. I'm just going to come out and say that's absurd. So I hope we can end the discussion there. Are you all set, Chief?
Madam Chair, thank you. I appreciate that comment. We certainly move as efficiently as possible with what's needed to do our job.
No question. No question of that. No question of that from the board.
Thank you. No, and I would just like to take a moment and thank everybody for the opportunity to present my budget request. So thank you very much.
Appreciate it, Chief. Thank you so much. All right, so we're going to move on. Thank you. Also, DPW, we have a whole host of people from DPW joining us. We have our operations manager, Chris Deming. We have our executive assistant, Mr. Deshara, Amy Deshara, our DPW director, Joe. Oh my goodness, I forgot his last. Parisi, Joe Parisi. I'm sorry. Too much. I see you too much lately. And our engineer, Mr. O'Donnell. We have, am I forgetting anyone, Mr. Parisi?
I believe you have Todd Wokel, buildings manager.
Oh, yes. Okay. We have our team here. So thank you all for attending. Thank you for your patience as we work through these budgets. And Mr. Gilberto, unless there's anything you need to add, I'm going to let Mr. Parisi and his team take it away.
Sure. Let me just correct the sharing feature. All right, Mr. Parisi, you should be able to share your screen.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
All right, how's that look?
Great.
Okay, great. So let's see, I've got to play this, but it's controls are blocking. Hold on a second. Okay. All right, so thank you very much for an opportunity to present the DPW budget for FY24. The budgets I'm presenting will be sanitation, fuel, administration, engineering, road and street, snow and ice, street lighting, tree care, machinery maintenance, cemetery, town buildings, stormwater, and water. The FY24 budget and review, a little sanitation increase in the amount of $25,619, a 1.83% increase. A fuel budget of $302,684, increasing, actually it's a level funded budget. DPW budget, $3,074,657, increasing by $289,959, 10.4%. Water budget, $3,624,689, increase of $89,711, a 2.5% budget increase. So budget requests of significant include increases in salaries due to contractual obligations, utility increases, mainly electricity, Martin's Pond maintenance included in the engineering budget, additional personnel training and education, town building, general contractual obligation increases, town building and road, street, general supply cost increases, miscellaneous small capital improvements, and increases for purchases of water from Andover. So the sanitation budget in FY23, it was $1,400,887. This year, we're requesting a budget number of $1,426,506. That's an overall increase of $25,619. Breaking it down a little bit, personal service costs, an increase of $650. The increased cost for collection of solid waste and recycling, you can see the FY23 budget was $888,050. We're asking for $905,852. That's an overall increase of $17,802 from the prior year. Increased costs of disposal costs, the tipping fee, if you will. Tipping fee in FY23 was $93.60 a ton. We had a budget amount of $429,624 for that line item. FY24 tipping fee has gone up to $97.34 per ton. So the budgeted line item has been increased to $446,791. Increase over prior year, $17,167. We also reduced the hazardous waste collection line item. We had a vendor that had some favorable price costs for that collection. And so we think we can reduce that by $10,000. All right, I will continue on to the fuel and vehicle. So the budget's level funded. We're looking at gas and diesel prices from the index. We think that we can stay within our budgetary costs from last year. DPW administration, FY23 budget, $181,856. Looking for a budget increase of $199,000 or a budget request of $199,259, an increase of $17,403. It represents an increase in personal services of $9,403, and also increase in purchase of services reflecting training and education costs. We have a lot of new employees with DPW. Want to have them attend the MCPPO certification courses and get certified in procurement. There's also some memberships, professional memberships, a PWA membership and chapter events, and mass recycling membership and conference and trade shows. The recycling committee members, at least one of the members, showed interest in that, as well as I do. So we're looking for a little funding on that as well. Engineering division. The FY23 budget, $77,013. The budget request for FY24 is $93,347. Overall increase of $17,334. The increase in personal services is $1,834. Increase in purchase of services is $15,500. There was $15,000 added for the maintenance of Martin's Pond. And there's some miscellaneous increases of $5,000 to other professional services. Road and street budget, the FY23 budget, $606,491. The FY24 budget, $661,849. The overall increase is $55,358. Increase in personal services equals $42,358. Increased purchase of services, $2,000. Increased purchase of supplies, $7,000. Decrease in other charges and expenses of $3,000, and there's an increase in miscellaneous capital of $7,000 for a jib boom attachment loader. Snow and ice, FY22 expenditures were $637,501. We have been level funded, as we all know. Snow and ice is you're able to expend. If snow and ice conditions are above, the budgeted cost. We have a budgeted FY23 of $175. It's level funded in FY24 to $175,000 as well. In FY23, just a little note there. So we had 18 events to date, 12 salt only, 2 scrape salt, and 4 plow events. And that expenditure is at $427,431 already. Street lighting, FY23 budget of $78,782. Looking to increase that line item to $93,356. The overall increase is $14,574. Represents an 18.5% increase in cost based on RMLD estimate of rate increase of the 18.5%. So tree care, $45,000. It's a level funded budget from FY23. I think last year we were requesting some personnel to really form a tree division, but it's not a request for any additional personnel. That's purely cost for contract services for tree care and some other minor things. Machinery maintenance. So the FY23 budget, $336,943. The FY24 budget request, $351,525. The overall net increase, $14,582. Increase in personal services were $19,582. Level funded for purchase of services and supplies. Net decrease in miscellaneous small capital, $5,000. So the miscellaneous small capital requests do total $68,005. There's an abrasive blaster for $5,000 being requested, a front end loader tire or tires for $9,500, replacement tires, and a scan tool upgrade that's needed for $2,000. And that's a tool that diagnoses the issues with vehicles. Cemetery and grounds budget FY23 is $188,426. The FY24 budget, $199,096. The overall net increase is $10,670. There is a breakdown of an increase in personal services for $15,170. Level funded for purchases and services, supplies, and other charges. There's a net decrease in the miscellaneous capital of $4,500. But we do have a request in small capital of $4,500 for cement mixer. That'll allow us to pour foundations for the headstones right on site. The town buildings budget, the FY23 budget, $693,708. The FY24 budget, $804,801. Overall increase, $111,093. So that breaks down with an increase in personal services of $4,369. Increase in purchase of services of $96,124. The increased cost for contract services, that's a breakdown further. Increased cost for contract services for existing contractual agreements, the HVAC, electrical, plumbing, and general contracted services for building repairs. Utility cost increases, electricity, again, mainly, and town building mechanical systems that have surpassed their useful life. So increases to purchase of supplies, costs have gone up with supplies significantly. Looking for $6,300 increase in that line item. Increase to miscellaneous small capital, $4,300. That's over last year's number, but we are requesting small capital projects, totaling $26,000. It breaks down into a library fire suppression standpipe testing of $6,000 every 5 years that needs to be tested. We're due, perhaps overdue for that. An interior exterior painting of town buildings that we'd like to have funding for, so we can make a difference in, the coatings on the buildings, both exterior and the interior painting, for $20,000. Stormwater. So the FY23 budget was $400,594. The FY24 budget, $450,425. The overall increase is $49,831. The increase breaks down as a personal service increase of $43,831. And that reflects contractual increases. Increase to purchases of services, $3,500. That breaks down into an increase in repairs and maintenance line item of $2,500 and an increase to lease and for rentals of $1,000. The increase to purchase of supplies of $2,500 breaks down in an increase in drainage supplies for $2,000 and an increase in other public works supplies, minor supplies for $500. I'm going to jump into the water. Excuse me. So the FY23 budget and personnel for water was $794,532. Expenses, $2,740,446. Indirect costs, $511,480. And debt service was $1,185,128. The FY24 budget breaks down with personnel costs being $808,145. That's an increase of $13,614. The expenses were $2,816,543. The breakdown there is increase of 76,097 for purchase of water from Andover. That's an additional 60,543 this year being budgeted. There's an increase in cost to the Water Smart Neptune softwares due to licensing costs. That's $22,000. It was part of the warranty. It no longer is. It's part of the initial purchase cost. Net decrease in other miscellaneous costs of $10,446. We do have an increase in miscellaneous capital over last year, $4,000. We're looking to purchase the 40-foot trailer that we have on site that we've been renting. The cost of rentals, it's basically been sort of adding up, and it's cheaper now to purchase the trailer than it is to keep renting it. So we're looking to just buy that trailer off the rental company. So there is indirect costs this year of $524,267. That's a 2% increase. In debt service, $1,088, $342. That's a decrease in 8.2% this year. So the budget change, $5,712 overall. Going into just sort of an overview of the personal services costs. In the engineering department, administration, road and street, tree care, you can see 0. I guess bottom line, we're looking at $148,897 in personnel. That's DPW and water, representing 7.1% increase.
Okay, are we ready for some questions?
I got one more screen here. This is
I'm sorry.
I just wanted to pause a little bit in case anybody wanted to look a little closer. So real quick, so again, the various divisions, bottom line total, $4,216 from FY23, FY24, $4,447, net increase to $130,772, 5.5% increase. All right, now I'm ready for questions.
Okay. All right. Mr. Gilberto, you had your hand up, so we're going to start with you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's more clarification with regard to the percentage increase for the water department budget. That number at less than 1% struck me as low based upon our conversations over the past few weeks or even months. So I don't know if there's something going on with the formula there, but I thought I saw yesterday it was somewhere approaching 3%, which would be about normal. I know there might be some fluctuation in debt service going on, but I think we have to look further at that number, because come rate setting time, I don't want folks wondering why we're talking about a number that's not 0.1% in a rate increase.
I will double check that. Yeah, I saw that too as being, questionable. And I think the decrease in the debt, I've got to look a little further to see if that's where it's coming from.
Madam Chair, through you, that customarily has been a challenge because we don't get our debt service information until May. So we look at this budget, then we get debt service number, we finalize a budget, and then we come back with a rate hearing, as you know. So I just want the public or folks here just to know, hey, that there could be some fluctuation in that. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Gilberto. All set, Mr. Gilberto? Mrs. Hurlbut.
Yes, this concerns town buildings. Over the years, to some degree, through no fault of anybody, a number of building repairs and maintenance issues have been pushed out. They haven't been done. For the last year or so, there's been an attempt to really bring some of our buildings back online, for lack of a better term. Rot in the corner of the library was taken care of. The leak at the fire station, police station that's been bothering us and we've been throwing money at unsuccessfully for a long time has been taken care of. There are issues at the third meeting house that are either have been taken care of or are in the process of being taken care of. So the DPW and the town buildings under Todd are to be commended for bringing our buildings or having a plan and working at building our buildings, bringing our buildings back into some reasonable condition. We have a number of older buildings, and our infrastructure does need a lot of attention at this point. And I think that they are to be commended for the job they've been doing, and I would support the increase in that budget, hands down.
Thank
And
you.
Joe, that was a well done report. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Roberts. Okay, do we have any other questions from my colleagues on FinCom or Select Board? Mr. Kelleher.
Thank you. I staying on the buildings, I'm not quite sure how much we're putting into preventive maintenance, and is that increasing? I mean, I agree with Abby that we're doing a better job, but all you need to do is look at the buildings, as I have some of them, and there is years and years of neglect, and I'm not blaming Todd. This goes way back, and you can only get so much done in a year. But I'm just wondering, what are we doing in preventive maintenance, and how much is that budget being increased over prior years? And I'm not just talking about exterior painting of town buildings. It goes beyond that. I mean, there are parts of buildings that just need to be wrought in wood. If you look for example, over the police station, the dormers over the police station, looks like they hadn't been touched in many, many years. And what's happening is the window casements are rotting out. So that's not a painting job. That is a repair job. So if you kind of address, not specifically the police station, because that's one that I did see and was upset to see that, but just what we're doing in preventive maintenance other than painting.
All right, so let me first start off by saying, we have a good team that's now focused on building maintenance, and Todd is certainly leading that group, with Nick Atwater being, a direct employee of the town, doing repairs as well. But we also utilize contract services, HVAC, electrical, plumbing, and general carpentry type of services and painting type of services. We have those contracts available, and we're utilizing those along with our town employees to get the work done. And so this funds pretty much that ability to use those services, buy materials. And, Todd has a long list of things that, he's looking to get done, needed things. And he's already mentioned to me, the work at the police station that needs to be done. So I know he's got that on the list. But I'm going to turn that over to Todd to give some more details on, his thoughts of the maintenance that needs to be done. So Todd, if you would.
Is this level funded, or is there an increase in this, in the items you just mentioned?
So the maintenance, so we have, I'll give you some detail here. So of the 92,000, excuse me. I'm sorry. So of the 96,124 increases. So we have 19,200 of that is electricity increases. There's some small increases in water as well. But repairs and maintenance is $72,128 of that increase. And
Okay.
custodial services is $3,900. So the predominant amount of the increase is for repairs and maintenance of the buildings.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Keller, I think Mr. Parisi wants maybe some further information to answer you in response to your question from Todd as well.
Yes.
All set? Welcome.
Yeah. Hello. I'd like to just explain what we're doing is we're looking at existing contractual agreements with the HVAC, plumbing, electrical, and general contract services. These contracts are due to expire prior to the close of fiscal year 2024. we anticipate an increase in those services. These existing contracts were signed prior to the COVID pandemic, so we anticipate an increase in those services. We've really focused on, in the last year, to identify energy efficiencies in the buildings and areas that are compromised, like Mr. Kelleher had mentioned, the police station and the trim in the exterior of the public safety building. In this fiscal year, we're looking to address those needs in painting the exterior and looking to paint the interiors of the municipal buildings also. We've seen an increase in utility costs. Mechanical systems in the buildings, some of the systems are at their end of their useful life. An example would be the library. The library system is over 30 years old. It surpassed its useful life, and we're working with National Grid and Mass Save to find innovative ways to reduce the project costs through rebates. So that's an initiative we're working on. And also we're working with National Grid to look at weatherization in town buildings. That weatherization could be door sealing, window sealing, to capture more rebates. What they base that on is per ton for the BTUs that buildings use. So what it is, if we work with adding on the weatherization to these buildings, we could capture more rebates. So we're working on that. It's anticipated that just in the library, if it's decided by the town to replace the systems in the library, we could be looking at $140,000 in rebates. So it's a great story, and we'd like to continue on that. And we've seen an increase in elevator services and maintenance in the buildings. The elevators maintenance has gone up approximately 50%. So we've seen these other systems, the senior center, the police. These systems are older and they're needed. Maintenance has increased, and also the deliverables on the equipment as far as the systems, their age. Getting parts for these systems is difficult, so you have to find supplemental parts to keep these systems running. So that's been a challenge, and deliverables, and so that's where we're at now.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Todd.
Thank you for the input, Todd, and we certainly appreciate your being proactive, not just with the building issues that are needed to be reviewed, but also with these contracts and these vendor reviews, and certainly know that the efficiency, the building efficiencies are going to ultimately lead to budget efficiency. So we appreciate your work on that.
And if I could also,
if
I could also touch base on custodial services.
Sure.
As we're going to see an additional programming in the senior center and also in the library, custodial services will increase with those needs. Lunches at the senior center, so there'll be an added cost associated with that. So this is part of that increase too. Thank you.
Mr. Kelleher, did that answer your questions, and do you have any follow-ups?
That answered my question. I appreciate the answers. Thank you.
Are you all set? You all set?
I am.
All right. Mr. Sutherland.
This may be more of a procedural question, but why do we keep the snow and ice budget where it's at when we know we're going to spend 2 or 3 or even 4 times that based on the last 2 years?
Yes, you know what, Mr. Presenter?
I was looking to you, Mr. Gilberto. Yeah.
Mr. Gilbert is going to
Sure. Thank you, Madam Chair, through you. It's a great question. So there's 2 components to how we pay for snow and ice removal in the budget. One is an appropriation in the budget in the amount of $175,000. It's been that amount going back at least the 8 or going on 9 years I've been here, and I'm sure for a lot longer. There's a secondary piece that we budget for each year to carry over the cost from the previous year into the next. So the reason we do it that way is because snow and ice removal costs are one area in municipal expenditure where we are able to exceed the appropriation in order to pay the bills associated with it. But it comes with a catch. You need to maintain that appropriation 1 year over the next. So if we were to budget 175,000 and decide to increase that budget for the next year to say, $400,000, for example, in order to continue carrying over that deficit from 1 year to the next, we would have to continue that amount in perpetuity. And I think from a financial planning standpoint, what we have found is instead taking advantage of the ability to carry over, but carrying that number in the operating budget each year has worked well for us to make sure we have resources to cover the cost and are being honest in the budget process about how much it actually costs.
It's also only one of the areas that's authorized by law. We can't do that with other line items.
Correct.
And also it's a budgeting tool for us. And in other communities, it's the same for other communities. Helps us to keep a balanced budget this way. Mr. Sutherland, do you have any other questions? Did that answer your question?
I don't think.
Do you have any?
Yes, it does. Thank you. So I'm good.
You're all set. Okay.
Madam Chair, through you too, as we've seen the increase in cost of removing snow in the contracted rate and the cost of our own collective bargaining agreement, as well as the cost of salt, we have increased that over the years. So that carryover number I just referenced has actually increased from, I think, 250,000 to, I think it's either 350 or 400 this current year. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gilberto, for the input. Mrs. Gonzalez.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm just curious if, Mr. Parisi, if you could kind of expand and clarify on the trailer that we're renting and maybe what condition it's in, if it's worthwhile to buy it or just maybe rent it, get a newer one to rent, or if you could just expand on that.
Sure, I asked those same questions of my water superintendent the other day. So the trailer is in relatively good shape. We see no conditions that would make us be concerned about its long-term use. So $9,000 is I think we got that quote. And Matt, you can add anything you'd like, but or Chris. But I'm pretty confident that this is a cheaper alternative than buying a new one. But Matt, why don't you add?
Yeah, so when we got the trailer
Excuse me,
a few years ago,
Matt is Matt Prince, our water
Hello,
superintendent. Please, Mr. Prince.
we got the trailer a few years ago to hold some the water meters in when we needed a place to store those. It was a brand new trailer when it got dropped off on site, and it has only been used to hold the water meters and some miscellaneous undirty or damaged like equipment or cold storage. So the trailer itself is in really good shape. It's parked down at the garage. So yeah, so the trailer itself, it's almost it's 5 years old now, but it's still in new condition.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Prince. Mrs. Gonzalez, does that answer your question with regard to the trailer?
Yeah, so so you're saying it's $9,000 to purchase it, as opposed to what do we pay to rent it? Am I understanding that?
What are we paying to rent it?
I believe it is $1,200 a year. I think it's $100 or $200 a month.
$1,200 a year.
So Mrs. Gonzalez, it's not a temporary thing. In other words, we're expecting to have to continue using it, right? Is that where your line of questioning is? Why don't we just buy it if we're going to be renting it for the next 20 years?
Yeah.
Mr. I don't know.
Yeah, what was the incentive to feel that we needed to purchase it?
Lease it versus rent it versus purchase it. Okay, Mr. Parisi.
Yeah, so the thought there was that, paying the money of rent, we could own the trailer, so I think long-term that has a useful life that's significant enough that it would be cost effective to buy it as opposed to continue to rent it.
Oh, so in other words, the rental payment is going to acquisition of it? It's renting to
It's
own?
not a rent to buy, and you know, unfortunately, we just keep renting, and you know, we don't have, you know, the ownership of it. So over time, we're paying more than the trailer would cost us if we just bought it.
Mrs. Gonzalez?
So and the rent is going up to $110 next month, so next year. So so I think it just, you know, was an opportunity to just purchase, you know, the trailer we have there, and it should pay for itself over a number of years.
Okay, so you're seeing that we're gonna have a need for it.
Yes, the need is not going to go away.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, thank you.
Thank
Oh,
you.
so your proposal is to buy it, in other words, Mr. Parisi?
Correct.
Yes, okay. I had that the reverse. I'm sorry, Mrs. Gonzalez. Are you all set with your questions? All right, Mrs. Hurlbut.
Yeah, this concerns town buildings. We've always had an additional $50,000 towards town buildings. That for a long time appeared in the October warrant, but I believe was moved over to the June town warrant. Can I assume that that $50,000 does not show in the town buildings project FY 2024 budget with the purchase service of 96,124?
I believe that is the case. I know that there's been a supplemental budget amount of 50,000, as you mentioned, that has come from outside of the DPW budget.
I don't think we can spend too much money on town buildings at this point, so I'm all for it. I happen to be, because I'm chair of the facilities master plan, or I don't know what, maybe somebody wrote my phone number for a good time call on a phone book. But I am the recipient of phone calls from time to time about town buildings.
Mhm.
As Todd will attest, because I immediately get on the phone and say, hey, Todd, I just got a call. And most recently, the call concerned some rot on the corner of the Third Meeting House. And lo and behold, Todd already has a consultant coming out to look at the extent of that rot and to get a plan underway with, probably through HKT, or we call him Bob the envelope guy, to remedy the corner of that building. So can't throw enough money at town buildings, because at some point it's going to cost a whole lot more to take care of these issues. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Mrs. Hurlbut. Mr. Warner, I'm gonna get you. I just want to get back to Mr. Kelleher because he may have had some follow-ups. Mr. Kelleher.
Yes, thank you. It's with respect to the $50,000 warrant article, and just a little bit of history on that. Those who may not know, it was the Finance Committee who recommended that $50,000 be specifically earmarked for building maintenance many years ago, because we felt it just wasn't being done under some previous administrations, and didn't want to recommend that it just be put into the DPW budget, because it would just be accumulated with all of the other budget monies that are in there. It wouldn't necessarily go to the purpose that we felt it needed to go to. I guess my question is, do we need to continue doing that, or should we, as I believe, add the $50,000 to the DPW budget for repairs and maintenance, specifically preventive maintenance, and then at the end of the year or during the year, however the select board or the finance committee deems appropriate, just get some report on what we have accomplished with that 50,000 and the other repairs and building repair and maintenance amounts within the DPW budget. I think calling it out as a separate warrant article, I think, has outlived its usefulness, and that the DPW ought to take responsibility, as they do, for the preventive maintenance of all of our town buildings so that we're not in a condition where we've got to do major repairs to them because we didn't take care of the minor repairs. And I think we've got a team that will do that now. I'm not sure. We had that several years ago when that was instituted. So that would be my suggestion, is just roll it into the budget and have the DPW accountable, as they should be, and as they are, for the maintenance of town buildings.
I think that's more of a policy question. I know Mrs. Galvin has her hand up, but I'm not sure that that would be up to Mr. Parisi to answer, Mr. Keller. And I think that's more of a question for the committees to discuss, the board and the committee discuss whether or not we want to do that.
I agree. I agree. I'm just putting it out there so
Yes,
we understand why it's there and
yes.
what the purpose was. That's all.
Very helpful, yes. Mrs. Galvin. I think you might be muted. Me? Uh-oh.
Nope.
You may have got, you're still muted. You may have got knocked off. If you go to your mute button and you go to the little caret, you might just have to do your same as the system you're talking on. Go up, scroll up to that.
You can also jump out and jump back in, Lorianne. That's
Yeah. So I was going to suggest as well, that usually fixes it.
I can let you right back in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
There
we
you
can
are.
hear you now. There you go.
I'm back. Okay,
Yes,
sorry.
you're
Yeah.
I'm gonna get my tech support.
That's
Um,
good.
All I was gonna comment is if you put it in the operating budget and for some reason they can't get to all the projects, they're limited. They would have to know the vendor, make an encumbrance to carry it to the next year, whereas leaving it as a separate article gives them some flexibility as to what they can get to in a year, should they not be able to line up contractors or that type of thing. So while, yes, this administration can manage the projects better, putting in a separate article gives them flexibility.
I appreciate that input. And at the end of the year, putting it in that separate line item, does the remaining funds, if any, go back to general fund to be certified?
If it's in the operating, yes, it would close out if they don't know the vendor or what they want to do to carry it. Whereas if it's in a separate article, it just automatically can carry from year to year.
Okay, because that's another benefit, I think, to doing it the way that we're doing it too. So that money has that designated purpose can still be used the following year.
Correct.
Like you said, if there's an ongoing contract that goes from one fiscal period to another, or some work that may not have been engaged the prior year, but we know is going to be coming down next year.
Right.
And I see a finger there, Mrs. Hurlbut.
So I just wanted to check, forgive me, I'm an old woman. Has the $50,000 warrant article been moved from the fall to the June town meeting, which is for all practical purposes a more appropriate place for most money articles?
Madam Chair, through you.
Mr. Gilberto.
It has, but only as a function of the fact that free cash has not been certified in the fall the past 2 years. So I don't want to represent that a policy decision has been made, to forthwith fund it there, although I do think that's something we could consider doing. But I think that's been more a function of the lack of having free cash certified in the fall. We've been delaying it and multiple other articles to the June town meeting for action. That will happen again this year.
Does that answer your question, Mrs. Hurlbut?
Not entirely. It was my understanding a year or two ago that the finance committee recommended, and I believe that the town administrator was not totally outraged by the idea, that as many money articles as possible be in the June town meeting. And this was one article that we felt should rightly be placed in the June town meeting also. I do understand that there were a couple of times when, for whatever reason, we had to revert back to having a lot of money articles in October, but as a general principle, I think the finance committee felt fairly strongly, and I know in days of yore, the town of North Reading did have a policy of, as much as possible, having money articles in June.
We could take another look at it. I know in the past couple of years, we haven't had unfortunately haven't been able to move forward. One of the last June town meeting, we had to skip over multiple articles that have been published because it hadn't been certified, but I don't think we're gonna have that issue moving forward. So I think maybe just it was a bit of an anomaly these past few years, but I don't know if there's anything else, Mr. Gilberti, you want to add to that?
Only to say that I don't disagree with the sentiment that that's certainly the preference, but I think both Ms. Galvin and I would be cautious to overly commit to that approach, particularly in a year when free cash might not be as significant in its dollar amount as it has been in recent years. But Ms. Hurlbut's certainly correct that we have discussed that. I'm aware of the policy recommendation from the Finance Committee, and we are trying to stick with it. But I do want to also just point out that in the past couple of years, we haven't had a choice either.
Yes.
So thank you.
It's good. It's a good time to bring it up, Mrs. Hurlbut. So we are all, reminded of it as well. So, you all set, Mrs. Hurlbut? Yes. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Wallner, for your patience. Go ahead.
No problem. Thank you. So the only question I had was about the $96,000, but it's been pretty worked over, and I fully understand what we're doing, and I agree with it. Preventive maintenance is where it's at. You don't want it to turn into a bigger problem, so that makes sense. I appreciate the fact that we're going to put Martin's Pond into the budget for the DPW going forward, so it's they can continue to utilize the existing funds to maintain the pond. We learned, a month and a half ago, how much they're doing with that money, how effective they're being taking care of the pond, and how effective it's been. And so it's a good adjustment. So we don't have to think about that anymore. I just want to say, Joe, ever since you've come here, you got inundated with the sewer project right out of the chute. I don't think you've had a break from it yet, and certainly not now. And I think Leanne and I were on contract negotiations, everything with Chris and everybody. And during all of this, you coming on new, the DPW has been rock solid in delivering services. And I can't comment specifically, but 10 years ago, I don't think we were in the same shape we are right now. So to you and to the DPW for being so strong, thank you for doing all of that. And the last thing is, Todd, looks like, Todd, you're taking the lead on looking at energy conservation for some of the buildings in town. I'll let you know that the board is working on creating an energy, I don't want to say creating, there is an existing energy conservation committee on the books that hasn't been active in a number of years. We're looking to reconstitute that, and we'd be, I think when that is up and going, hopefully in a month or two, we'd love to help and work side by side with you and offer working towards energy conservation in town. So just put that as a future thing we'd love to help you out with and work towards as well. Thank you very much again.
Appreciate it, Mr. Wallner. And to my colleagues on FinCom or Select Board, any other questions? Mr. Wallner, are you all set? I'm sorry.
Yes, I'm all set. Thank you.
Any other questions to my colleagues on FinCom or Select Board? Okay, I'm seeing none, so I'm going to ask a couple. Mr. Parisi, can you go back to the sanitation budget slide for right there? Yeah, I have a question in regard to the this cost for collection of solid waste and recycling. This is separate and apart from our contract for trash removal, right?
So I'm sorry, say that again, please.
So is this budget request for collection of solid waste and recycling, that's totally separate and apart from our contracted trash hauling service, right?
So the the budget that we're requesting includes the cost of curbside collection, and it includes the cost of the actual cost of disposal by ton. So that's
Okay.
within the 1,426,000.
I think we actually increased the cost of the trash fee to accommodate the increased cost in collection. So is there a breakdown of, you know, what we're taking in from trash fees and what the actual cost just of that vendor service is?
Yeah, we are looking at the revenues that are coming in this year and how they're doing. I think Lori and I need to get together a little bit further and identify all of the revenues, but the $300 a year or $75 per quarter, we've actually been able to keep that fee the same for a couple of years now. I'm certainly hoping to continue to do that going forward by, you know, trying to control costs to the degree we can. But we will look at revenues, we'll look at the expenses, and, you know, be coming out with a recommendation for the actual fee itself.
Well, that's my particular question about this slide, because it looks like you're requesting an additional increase that's related to these tipping fees or that relating to the vendor hauling,
Correct.
not necessarily what our department picks up or supplements in terms of that hauling. So I'm wondering how much of, you know, why wouldn't that have just been absorbed in the trash fee that we're collecting, and why is that coming through our budget as an increase? Although small, I just want to know why that's coming through as an increase here.
Well, so you have to appropriate the amount of money necessary for the full cost of services for sanitation. The fees are just revenues that back up that appropriation. There is a cost to the town for this, for, you know, school trash, for town building trash that's, you know, collected in dumpsters. So,
Oh, so this is an additional cost that is the town's portion of that cost that's not paid by the fees collected.
correct. There is a portion of this budget that's paid for by the town. The rest is supported by the fees of the users.
Okay, I was unaware because we talk about trash quite a bit on the select board, but I wasn't aware that that had been extracted out and is not a part of that is not being covered by the fees collected. So, okay, so that leads to my next question. In terms of the current vendor, and I know we have other bigger fish to fry, so to speak, but the current vendor, when the ownership changed, didn't perform services for us for several weeks, and it took several weeks to get the new vendor when it went from JR to Republic, several weeks of time for the new vendor to get on board and get squared away and get moving on that. And to some degree, sometimes there's still an issue with that, but were we granted an offset in that cost at least this year, so that our, you know, our funding or our trash fee collected, I don't consider that a source of revenue, Mr. Parisi. I just consider it to be a 1-for-1. Whatever it costs us, we're billing, we're paying for that service. So I don't consider it to be a revenue stream to the town. I only consider it to be, here's the cost of hauling by this vendor, and this is what the fee goes towards. So did we get a credit from that vendor? Where are we at with regard to receiving a credit? Really, there were 3 months, I think, where the vendor just wasn't doing what they were supposed to be doing for the town.
Right. So you're referring to the purchase of JRM by Republic Services, and Republic Services has a draft amendment for a change in the contract amount, both for, you know, going from a single-day collection to a 5-day collection, and also for a credit, if you will, a one-time, you know, compensation to the town for its costs and for services not provided. So we are, I believe I'll be hearing from them next week. I asked them to, you know, respond back by then, and we'll work to finalize that amendment, that agreement. So I will say then, and make note that I have not reduced the request at this time until that contract is, or that amendment is finalized, but we anticipate a $25,000 reduction in the cost of services for going from 1-day collection to 5-day.
Yeah, that should be. That's what they asked for. That's what they wanted. They got what they wanted by doing what they did, in my opinion. And we should be getting a decrease. So I'm glad to hear that that you're working on that and that you're fighting for that for us. And I also have to say, and I want to get to the snow and ice budget too, then, if you don't mind. And I'm also going to jump on board of what Mr. Wallner said earlier, that we moved past that period of time, but I know Mrs. Deshara was answering probably 1,000 questions a day, probably 900 of them were from my husband. So your team itself in picking up that slack and supplementing services, we can't even give you enough accolades. And I want to add on with the snow and ice. They're so proactive. They've been so good about taking care of the town, not just with that whole debacle that happened when the sale happened, but also, currently they did before, but they just really stepped up to the plate and really did a tremendous job there. And people were so upset about it, understandably. And so I just want to say thank you to all of your team for that. And thank your team as well for the snow and ice. And I wanted to ask you on the snow and ice about the historical spending on this and our expenditures to date. Do you think it's going to run in? I know we have a snow event coming next week, and it's hard to forecast, no pun intended, but do you think we're sort of on track to where we typically, where this snow and ice typically is expended? And then to Mr. Gilberto's point, do you think where you're keeping it level funded that there's a need, and this probably might be for Mrs. Galvin, is there a need for us to increase that budget request to be more, in line with what our historical expenditure is?
So to answer your question about where I think expenditures are going this winter, more than likely we'll be approaching, the 637, but obviously it all depends on how many more storms we get between now and, when winter finally leaves us. But, it'll may break into the 500,000 number. I think we're at near record lows of snowfall amounts. So we're probably not going to get it to the 637 for sure.
Okay. And then can you slide to the machinery slide? I actually want to ask you this about machinery slide and cemetery slide, if you don't mind, if there's a machinery. So in terms of your miscellaneous small capital that you've incorporated into your budget, that's part of what you're incorporating on all of these slides with these different things that you've put here. Your proposal incorporates just paying those out of your operational funds that you're in your budget request, not submitted to the capital planning.
Right, because these purchases are below a threshold that would be put on the large capital requests, that put in the operating budget small capital.
One of the things I appreciate in terms of the budget that you prepared is this itemization of these things. And again, just being proactive and forward thinking and knowing what you need to do and incorporating that into your operational budget. And from my questions, I see more hands up, but I just want to say these budget hearings are the opportunity for us to, again, it's kind of, we've interfaced with you a lot this year. We know your team has done a tremendous amount of work, just as, assisting the town with the sewer project, among other things this year that were thrown at them. And this time is an opportunity for us to just acknowledge that. Thank you. Ask you to take that back to, with your team that's here. We thank you so much for all the work you've done, but take it back to your members on your team and just tell them how much we're proud of them and we're grateful to them for all their service.
Thank you. I will. I certainly will. No, I definitely see a team here in North Reading that's exceptional, and I'm really glad to be working with them.
Great. And
Thank you.
we're going to go to more questions because I see more hands up. So Mrs. Hurlbut.
Yeah, Joe, concerning the 900,000+ for trash removal or whatever that line item was called.
So 905
FY24 budgeted amount of 905,852.
solid waste collections.
Right, so could you please confirm that there is no trash fee offset to that amount? Because that's what your answer to Mrs. Manupelli sounded as if, like.
No, the answer is, my response should have been that you appropriate the full amount of the costs for the services. The revenues are to support that, but it doesn't reduce, the appropriated amounts that you need to pay.
No, I got that, but the 905 is in fact offset to a large degree by the trash fees, is that correct?
Yes, sure. So the full budget of 1,426,506 is largely supported by trash fees. That's correct.
So this is not an addition to the amount that the trash fees go towards.
That's correct. No, it's
Okay.
not.
And then one other question concerning tipping fees. I realize that the per ton tipping fee has increased. Are tonnage amounts going down at all or staying relatively stable?
So when I look back a few years, they were higher than they have been in the past year or so. So I would say that it's come down, and I hope to keep them stable. I need a little bit more history to see, what kind of trend we're really going to have going forward.
And that typically can be correlated to a limited degree with recycling. Is that not?
I would hope it would be, you would see recycling going up and trash going down. That's correct.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All set, Mrs. Hurlbut?
I am indeed. Thank you.
Okay. Mrs. Gonzalez.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. I want to stay right here because we do love to talk trash. I just wanted to ask about the new program with the overflow bags that has been introduced for any trash that is over what you would use in your 2 barrels. Those bags that can be purchased. I know that that's a new program, so we're probably not seeing a lot of action on that, but eventually, as that picks up, will that money offset any of this in the future?
So again, the appropriated amounts would be but the revenues that do come in will help to, again, support the full budget. So when I'm looking at the amount of appropriation that I have to sort of raise through fees, when I take out the money from the bag revenues, that helps keep those fees stabilized, and that's my goal.
Great.
Okay.
Thank you.
Mrs. Gonzalez?
Yep.
Okay, I do not see any other hands up from my colleagues. Anything else, Mr. Parisi, that you want to add? You all set?
I'm all set.
All right. So thank you very much to you and your team for being here and explaining everything. And Mr. Gilberto, anything else? I know there was one more chat that was related to Mr. Chief Staff's question. I think that you wanted to address Mr. Gilberto. Was that sure?
Folks, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Thank you. There was a comment in the chat that looks like it came in maybe just after the chief came in, or wasn't seen until just after the chief departed. It's from, it says, hello, Chief Stats. This is Adam Austin, 42 Main Street. I have one follow-up question regarding training costs and retention. When we agree to pay for training for new hires, can we place a minimum service time requirement on new hires? And so I am able to respond to that, that is something that is subject to collective bargaining, and there are components of costs that are incurred by the town that we do cover in a look back period. So, requiring somebody to be employed for a period of time. And if they leave within that time, they're required to pay us back in some various areas of the cost that we incur, whether it's upfront training or whether it's down the road training. It's not universal, but there are components that are covered by that type of provision. And the second thing I would say is that we are a civil service department, so we don't see a lot of turnover, and we generally need to approve of a transfer from one civil service to another department. So we look at those requests pretty closely. They are fortunately rare, so the upfront investment is generally a good one. But sorry, we didn't see that question until after the chief had left. I just want to respond to it.
Thanks, Mr. Gilberto. Any imposition of a change in a working condition like that would require some negotiations with the union and some agreement with the union in writing. So that would be a tall order to impose those kind of restrictions unless we got the union's agreement on it. I wanted to ask you, if you don't mind, I completely forgot, I had it on my list to ask the chief for these new hires. He annually files for that SAFER grant, and I'm wondering if you could maybe by our next meeting, if you could just ask him to give us some input on whether or not he applied, whether or not some of the, at least the initial 1, 2, 3 year costs could be offset if we were granted the SAFER grant. I think the last application process, we did not get accepted, but is there another opportunity for that as a means of funding some of this, at least for a portion?
Sure. I know there was a recent application that we were notified, I believe in December, January, that we were not awarded for staffing. But that is an annual grant, and I expect it will apply again, but I will get a full report from the chief.
Okay, appreciate that. And to my colleagues, does anyone have any other questions or anything else? I don't see anything. So do we have a motion to adjourn? Thanking everybody for joining today. It was a long meeting, but helpful.
Mr. Wallner, I know we didn't give a written motion, but would you be able to offer that?
Yeah, Madam Chair, I move to adjourn this meeting.
There's only one other select board member that can second that one, so.
Second.
Second by Mrs. Gonzalez. Mr. Wallner?
Aye.
Mrs. Gonzalez?
Aye.
And Kelly is aye. Members of FinCom, Mrs. Hurlbut, you want to call for yours? You're okay. I guess we're going to take the thumbs up.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Thank you all. I know you're all volunteering your time. I appreciate it on a Saturday morning.
Yeah, see you Monday night.